Is absolutely. And when I say this to people, they say, yeah, you're right. Some people go, oh, you're wrong. Something is happening in this country, and I'm not talking about conspiracy theories or uprisings. What I call the moderate mainstream, the people who pay their taxes, don't break the laws and have never had a handout, are suddenly going, why are we 8th in the queue? Why are we being treated like, you know, we're being treated really badly, and other people who deserve nothing are being let off, and that is fundamentally what's wrong with Great Britain.
Spot on.
Be interesting. 0344 419 1000. Ian Collins back tomorrow afternoon for the Housewives Choice.
But Jeremy Kyle is on the other side of the news at 4 o'clock here on Talk, which is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Just gone 4 o'clock. It is Wednesday. What is it? The 5th of February. And we are on Talk, of course, the home of free speech and common sense. And a big thank you, as ever, to the Housewives Choice, Ian Collins, back tomorrow afternoon from 1. So much to talk about. Can I just say, as ever with Drive, I have this amazing team, Ryan and Jodie. They put this show together. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. There are radio presenters who prepare and write things. Nothing like that. This is your show. I've said it again and again. If Talk achieves anything, it speaks common sense, and it says to you, the viewer, the listener, whatever you want to talk about, get your call in. Your opinion is important to us. 0344 499 1000. You can ring that. Our Jodie on the phone. Hello. You're through to Talk. That was my impression of a Scouse one. You can also get us on WhatsApp. Ryan likes a voice note. It makes him feel important and full of esteem. So you can get in via WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000 for a voice note, or you can, of course, text us throughout the show, 87222. Start your message with the word Talk. Already this week, the madness that this country is. You know, our Prime Minister with a voice coach. Just to give you a little bit of an update on Leonie Malinga today, Turns out she was married to Robin Asquith. Those of you old enough will know that Robin Asquith was the star of a soft porn movie, well, a series of soft porn movies, Confessions of a Window Cleaner, Confessions of a Taxi Driver, Confessions of a Prime Minister, methinks. The Mail are absolutely on that as a story. That's fantastic. But let's start seriously. Today, two pieces of news that we think, and I think, really sum up what's wrong with the United Kingdom. Safeguarding seems to be in place for anybody who commits a crime, for anybody who comes to this country that really doesn't deserve that. But for honest, everyday, hard-working Brits, they don't seem to give a toss. Let's talk about the Southport killer. Axel Rudabicana, what was he, 17 and 300 and something plus days, now serving 52 years for murdering in cold blood those three innocent young girls. It turns out today that the government's counter-extremism group, Prevent, missed, ready for this, 3 times they closed investigations into Axel Rudabicana because apparently they didn't consider him a threat. Great. What do you say to the families that did that? Then you have the families of those 3 teenagers and, of course, the family of the school janitor who were murdered by Cal Coney, that schizophrenic in Nottingham. Turns out now that he wasn't given his medication by the NHS because of a fear of needles. So we'll just ignore that and let him out onto the streets to make sure he murders some people as well. So you've got 2 killers being treated with kid gloves, and yet this is the same week, and you've heard me talk about it, and I make no apology for this at all. Councils across this country spending millions of pounds saying to, stressed and tired, illegal migrants, I know it's been an awful trip and I know you've only had one night in a hotel and you've seen a doctor, but you must be feeling quite quashed. So we'll give you all these freebies. We'll give you games consoles and tickets to Premier League things. We'll teach you, are you really, honestly, circus stills, we'll give you driving lessons. And by the way, the most important thing is we want you to feel part of Great Britain. We want you to feel okay. So if someone's nasty to you and they say, why are you here? Or you're not very good at your PlayStation game. If you feel threatened, if you feel that, you should report a hate crime, we're here for you and we'll send the police around and we'll crush those horrible, horrible people. That's what's wrong with this country. We're soft to the people that don't deserve it, and we do not look after our own. And I make no apology for saying our own. People will say, that's inflammatory language. Is it? 0344 419 1000. Text to 87222. We say a very good afternoon. He's deemed here as a political commentator. He's a man who looks comfortable in a cardigan. He's just had a piece of lemon drizzle cake. Russell Quirk, a very good afternoon, sir.
It made me sound like the political equivalent of Max Bygraves there.
Sing along a Max.
Yes, let's not.
Sing along a Quirky.
Let's not.
Mate, honestly, we haven't spoken yet about asylum seekers being given PlayStations, but let's start more seriously today. Prevent missed the Southport killer 3 times. The NHS don't make Axel Rudabicana Cal Coney take his medication because he doesn't like needles. So you're free to go and murder, but we're going to wipe the backside of anybody who comes to this country, whoever they are. What is wrong with this country, Russ?
The issue here, of course, is that this is a recurring, repeat issue almost on a weekly basis. Now, I know we're very close to the news because it's what we do.
Yep.
But let's be really honest here. Whether it comes to child abuse or whether it comes to people being murdered, having slipped through the net of social services, the police, the justice system and so on, this is becoming so frequent as to be incredibly worrying and sinister. Almost on a weekly basis now, we see that someone within the justice system, the police, the security services, or wherever, social services, it seems in particular, are missing big red flags,
Why?
which then lead to children dying, children being raped, people in these cases being murdered on the streets, as in the case of Cal Coney. I'll tell you why, and I think it's because we have lost all sense of accountability and responsibility in the public sector. And with this government in particular, Jez, what we're now doing is wrapping them all in cotton wool, civil servants and so on, of which, by the way, there are more now than there have ever been in Britain's history.
Just for your information, people, since the Labour Party came to power, 10,000 extra civil servants employed in central government.
Yeah,
Ludicrous.
A £16 billion per annum salary bill for our civil servants. So, you know, whichever part of the public sector they're in, I mean, we can also talk about, you know, the Home Office and Border Force, of course, equally incompetent. There seems to be this kind of mix of a lack of competence, but I think because there's a lack of accountability, and I compare it in contrast to the private sector, which I've worked in all of my life, where there is absolute accountability, responsibility, transparency.
If you don't succeed, you're out.
If you mess up,
you're out.
You go. The problem is now, and I have to tell you, I get, like you do, a number of messages through social media, direct messages from people that are, for instance, in the civil service, saying, you know, I've been signed off for several weeks on full pay because I misgendered someone, or because I refused to go on an unconscious bias training course. We have become obsessed as the blob, as the civil service, this left-leaning activist civil service of ours, with cotton wool covering wokeism and effectively just not holding anybody to account.
And it's costing people lives. It's saying there's no safeguarding.
And so when the left start talking about what Donald Trump is doing in terms of clearing the swamp of the civil service, US aid and so on, and they say, well, this is absolutely outrageous. It is the opposite of outrageous. It's exactly what we need to do in Britain.
Never happened here, though, will it?
Well, I don't know. I think, look, I've said before, I think that there will be, in this country, if there's enough pressure put on by the public and the media. I mean, look, most of the media, that's not going to happen, unfortunately, because they're kind of, well, let's just say they're slightly biased, aren't they, towards the left. If there is enough pressure put on, I think there will be a political revolution. My point is that political revolution is not just about our hapless politicians. It is also about the civil service. And I think, honestly, if you and I went into office, I mean, can you imagine that, Jeremy? You as Prime Minister, me as Home Secretary, just imagine that for a second. On day one, I would go to the Treasury and say, how much is it going to cost me to fire 100,000 civil servants? And they say, well, I'm sorry, Minister, you just can't do that. I said, no, that's not the question I asked. What's it going to cost? And they'll say it's going to cost you £1 billion. And they're all going to take it to a tribunal. OK, allocate the money. They're gone. We are
save the Chego sons. I'm with you. Yeah. I really want to know what you think, peeps out there. It is, look, the truth of the matter is safeguarding. I believe, as a country, we should be able to believe that we are going to have that. Whether you are the father and mother of one of those 3 young girls murdered in Southport because a man had been missed by the government's counter-terrorism group 3 times, or you're one of the parents, family members of those students hacked to death by a schizophrenic, allowed out because he was scared of bleeding needles. How are we supposed to take, as Russell says, these organisations seriously? And we bend over backwards to say, oh, we want to make sure you feel OK. Hurty words to asylum seekers. It's so unfair. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Text right now. 87222. Start your message with the word talk. On the back of that, you go, well, is it a lack of accountability? Is this fundamental ideology from this government? Today we find out that 5 million people, and this pin back your logos will affect you people, are going to be denied the chance to vote in local elections this year after a swathe of councils were told to postpone them by the one and only Angela Rayner. She's allowed them, certain councils, to raise council tax, and she's now saying we're changing rules and we're changing boundaries and you lot can't vote. This is the state. This is the state telling us now what we can and can't do to even demonstrate what we think democratically, isn't it?
So let's just tackle the council tax point first, because this is an absolute outrage. The fact that on video, you will find it on social media, Keir Starmer looked down the camera in July, before he got elected, June and July, and promised the British public that there would be no council tax increases. We are now 7 months into this government. Not only are there going to be council tax increases, but Angela Rayner's gone out of her way to sanction increases of up to 10%. Now, the legal boundary was 5%, so you have to go to government, apparently, as a council in order to sanction above that. But Angela Rayner has quite happily and merrily, despite that promise by her boss only 7 months ago, said that those councils that want to put council tax up by 10%
I want to talk about the elections, and I'll tell you why, because Farage is speaking right now, and he is talking about how these elections being cancelled, local elections, are not the right thing. Can we dip into this? Can we go to this right? Yes or no? Tell me. Let's go to Nigel Farage, speaking right now.
Should have new councillors, fresh open debate about these so-called reforms or changes. There is no justification for cancelling these elections whatsoever, other than sheer cowardice of what reform might do to them in those campaigns.
Let's just cut. See, that's the point, and that is what. And people can say, "Oh, Jez, you come every day and you say reform this and reform that." Yeah, reform are talking about people's rights. It is surely our right to vote in a council election, and we're being denied that by a system that's saying, "Oh, we're changing it." That smacks, as Nigel quite rightly says, that smacks of a hatchet job. People have to do something about this.
It does, and bearing in mind that there are some councils in Britain, whether they're county councils in particular, actually, but also some district and borough councils. I was a councillor in Brentwood for 8 years.
Were you?
Utter waste of time that was, but that's a story for another day, Jez. There are councils that only are up for election every 4 years. So this now has been cancelled stroke postponed. It means that some people in some counties of Britain will not have had their say for 4, 5 or maybe even more years than that.
Why are they doing this, the Labour Party?
Well, so the Labour Party's excuse, and Nigel Farage is absolutely right, it is just an excuse. His excuse is that, her excuse, Angela Rayner's excuse, is that it's devolution. And what they're trying to do now to save money is to effectively smash a load of councils together. So what you'll end up with is your county council, your town council and your district council being the same thing.
Whatever.
Now, what that does, it doesn't save any money at all because your potholes still won't be fixed, social care will still be a mess, planning will still be lost in quagmire. Believe me, I've been involved with that for very many years. It won't make anything more efficient. What it will do, though, is to put your elected representative even further away from you. So
Absolutely.
You probably don't even know who your councillor is. You've got no chance of knowing who they are if they are in charge of overseeing or representing maybe 300,000 or 400,000 people. What this is about, Nigel is absolutely right, is Reform are leading in the polls and increasing their lead. Let's be clear what would happen here. If there were elections in May, the Labour Party would take more than a drubbing, more than a bloody nose, but so would the Conservatives probably. The message that then sends to the grassroots Conservative and Labour Party members, but also to councillors that have now lost their seats and to MPs that think, well, clearly we're next. There would be unrest within both parties. There would be massive pressure on the likes of Kemi Badenoch and indeed Keir Starmer, who's under enough pressure as it is. Probably for Keir Starmer it would be the death knell if he doesn't get hung by this other thing, the voice coach thing. So the reason given is not the real reason. The real reason is because the Labour Party and the Conservatives, which is why in your local council right now, when this goes to council to be voted upon, you'll be forgiven for thinking, why are the Conservatives and Labour both voting to postpone these elections? It's because both of them are very, very scared that they're going to lose lots of seats.
But my point is this, and I directly appeal to the people listening or watching. I want to know what you think on this, right? So you are taking us for mugs.
Yep.
Our politicians are saying we are so concerned at the threat that reform poses to our monopoly for however many years. This is no longer, reform is no longer a flash in the pan. I don't believe, like Brexit, it'll be for one thing. I believe, and I've said it for weeks and weeks, that the Reform Party is here to stay, and I believe that the ideology that we're being fed is wrong. And we can talk about safeguarding, we can talk about migrants, we can talk about elections, we can talk about anything you damn well want. Politicians in this country, in my mind, need to understand that the British people, they went through this sort of impasse, didn't they, where they weren't really listening to politicians. They were fed up that politicians were getting expenses and now they feel they're taking the PISS out of them. And now the British people are not prepared. Oh, here we go. Oh, right, you really want to wind me up, don't you? Oh, my God.
What's happened? I can't see what you can see, Jez.
So, the voice coach, right? The voice coach, Leonie Malinga, Sir Keir Starmer. It is proven that that lady, an ex-actress who's married to a anyway, doesn't matter. There was a picture in the Mail with her bits out today. But this lady went to see Keir Starmer on Christmas Eve during Tier 4 restrictions in a mask to teach him how to speak better, right? No action to be taken by the Metropolitan Police. That's just been announced, breaking news on Talk. Action to be taken by the Metropolitan Police. That does not mean it didn't happen. And that is like the beer and the curry night. That is an absolute disgrace. And people can have a go at me and say, oh, calm down, Jez. A piece of cake and Boris Johnson lost his job. This lying piece of whatever is getting away from it again. That's what's wrong with the system.
And let us remember that this is the same Christmas where we were told that we couldn't mix with our families.
Yes.
So we've got this hypocrisy, this breach of the rules, which clearly is a breach of the rules, and it's been admitted that it's a breach of the rules.
So how have the Metropolitan Police not read the room there?
Can I just join a dot or two? And I said this to Ryan on the way in, and he looked at me a bit kind of conspiracy theorial. And I said, this is not going to go anywhere, because guess who is the Metropolitan Police and Crime Commissioner?
Sadiq Khan.
Sadiq Khan.
Who's just got a knighthood. That is disgusting.
Join the dots.
If you're just tuning in, Sir Keir Starmer admits we know this happened. The voice coach went to his office on Christmas Eve when we're all not able to go anywhere, and this old bird with a face mask, quite talking about how to speak better, was absolute rubbish. No action to be taken by the Metropolitan Police. A spokesman has just said to Talk, we can confirm we received a report, that's a complaint. The specific legislation that will be oh my God, people, you're going to go mad. The specific legislation that will be used by police forces dealing with alleged offences during COVID has a 3-year deadline for initiating proceedings. As this alleged incident falls outside of this time frame, no action will be taken.
So they're saying that there's a statute of limitations of 3 years. No one knew that.
OK.
But you know what's going to happen now? Mark my words, here's a prediction. Nigel Farage, in the next 24 hours, is going to announce, I bet, a private prosecution of Keir Starmer.
Got to happen. Let's go straight to the phone lines. New caller in Buckinghamshire. Nigel, did you hear the news, Nigel? The British police, the Metropolitan Police are taking no action against Starmer because it happened more than 3 years ago. It's a con job, mate. Nigel!
He's lost for words.
Hi, Jeremy, how are you?
Right, go on, crack on, mate, hurry up.
Yeah, I believe the British public now are ready for another general election.
Yes,
I think the appetite is there now. I know it's not going to happen, but I think everyone is fed up now.
Have you just heard what I just said about the Met Police? They're not going to charge, they're not going to look into Sir Keir Starmer having that bird to teach him how to speak properly on Christmas Eve, because apparently the alleged offences took place outside the 3-year deadline. This is a con job, isn't it, Nigel?
It's an absolute stitch-up. He's Pinocchio. His nose is getting bigger and bigger every time he speaks.
I think the British public are in absolute uproar. 4:20. Thank you to Russell. What do you make of that? We can talk about safeguarding. We can talk about free consuls to illegal migrants. But let's concentrate, as we always do, on breaking news on Drive, on Talk. No action to be taken by the Met Police against Sir Keir Starmer. Yes, he might have and probably did break those lockdown rules. But guess what? It was more than 3 years ago. So the dirty, lying little man is going to get away with it again. This is Drive.
this is, I think, about putting pressure on all sides, basically, to behave. I mean, obviously...
You think it's one of his negotiating
positions? They're not actually going... Gaza is not about to become the 51st state.
That's Canada.
Yeah, well, it depends who wants it more. That's not going to happen. First and foremost, it's about putting a bit of pressure on Israel, about saying to the Israelis, look, you know, if you're not going to play nice, then we can just do what we want with this. We are big and powerful enough. But the whole thing about relocating people out of Gaza to the rest of the Arab world is also about saying to them, and you're going to have to play nice too.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
4:25. I thought I would have a really nice, calm, relaxed day. I thought we'd talk about how Prevent had missed, you know, the Southport killer and how the NHS had let Axel Rudabikana not murder people because he didn't like needles. And then we get that bombshell news. 10 minutes ago, if you're just tuning in to Talk Drive, no action to be taken by the Metropolitan Police against Sir Keir Starmer. This is the voice note thing, the voice coach thing. Apparently she did come to his house on Christmas Eve in a mask to teach him how to speak better. We all pointed out on Talk for the last 24 hours, what's the difference between that and Boris Johnson having a bit of cake? It turns out now the Met Police will not be taking any action. And do you know why? Because they've just announced that the specific legislation that would be used to deal with such offences during COVID has a 3-year deadline for initiating proceedings, which means it's a con job. And my next guest, the legend that is Mike Graham, just used the greatest line ever during that break. This government, this society, somebody is redefining the bleeding truth in this country.
They are, because they're on the one hand admitting that there was something wrong, while before...
we've got an issue with you, Mike. Why does it always happen to me? Why don't we sort Mike's out? It's nobody's fault. It happens. I wish you could see what's happening. 4:25. Jodie is on her hands and her knees, and Mike Graham is being text messages. Talk, I'm disgusted with the Met Police, says Dennis in Manchester, but not in the least bit surprised. Shameless Keir and his cronies are always going to weasel their way out of it. Utterly ludicrous. When did they bring in a statute of limitations on these things, and how fortuitous that such a statute just happens to be too short to do for Keir, but just long enough to do for Boris. Two-tier laws now. Sack the bleeding lot of them. I promise you, said Dennis, if I could leave this country, I would leave right now. People believe this.
Because let's not forget, 2 days ago we were told the police weren't investigating the situation because nobody had complained about it, right? So the police didn't tell us then, which they should have done if this was not cooked up in the last 24 hours. Why didn't they say 2 days ago, well, we won't be investigating it because it's happened more than 3 years after the event, and so therefore the law no longer applies? They didn't say that then.
No.
Guess why? Because there wasn't a law that applied. Because surely that's what they should have said. And then nobody would have complained, and that would have been the end of it.
It's
but
true.
instead,
it's true.
Right?
I mean, Greg says no wonder he was smirking. The book revealing it deliberately didn't come out until after 3 years. Slippery lawyer escapes the truth again. Jeremy, we've known for some time that we have a banana republic of government. Now it's official. Chris in Ottershaw. Let's go to Bolton. New caller. Mark, you're on with myself and Mike Graham. What do you reckon? Starmer's got out of another one, man.
Oh, I'm not surprised Jeremy Two-tier gets away again. I wish to God we could get rid of this guy, but I'm afraid that I think, like you said many times, and Mike and the rest of the group, I think it's going to be these disastrous 4 years, these depressing 4 years.
I think that's right, and it's just, for me, Mikey, as well. You've got a system. You've so nailed it. Redefining the truth.
Yeah.
That's a hatchet job. He spent 24 hours using his lawyer's skills to make sure that he gets this
because
sorted.
This is what he does. This is what he did about Southport. You know, he reconstructed an entire kind of, protective fence around himself.
Narrative.
And basically said in his press conference, if you remember, oh, well, the thing is, we didn't call him a terrorist at the time, not because we were frightened of calling him that, not because we were worried that people would react, but because, technically speaking, the definition of terrorist doesn't apply to him. Absolute and utter cobblers. Everybody knows the guy's a terrorist. Everybody knows that's what they should have called him.
There was ricin in his fridge, for Christ's sake.
He had an Al-Qaeda manual, for God's sake. I mean, but the point is that because he's a lawyer, he thinks he can lawyer his way out of everything, and he can say
it does beg the question.
He is like Mr. Loophole, and I have great respect for the real Mr. Loophole, who gets people off various things. But that's what he's like. He'll walk into any situation and try and redefine what it is that people are saying, and say, actually, that doesn't apply because there's a law over here that means that you can't do that.
And I hate to go on about Boris Johnson because Boris Johnson had his flaws, but he won an 83-seat majority from nowhere and was ousted within 3 years. Yes, there was a lot in the end that wasn't right. But they did everything they could over a piece of cake and a few drinks. I remember, I said this yesterday, and you weren't in when I said this. I remember him standing up in the Commons and saying about Starmer, you're telling me I was head of Downing Street and their mistakes. You were head of the DPP and you didn't prosecute Jimmy Savile. This man is using his lawyer skills to manipulate. Do you remember the beer and curry night in Bolton?
Absolutely.
What was the difference between that and 10 people in a room in 10 Downing Street?
Apparently
Nothing.
that was people working late.
And now some woman who comes to wherever his office is and teaches him how to speak on Christmas Eve.
I'm not buying that. Absolutely not.
I mean, I think it might have been oral, but that's all I'm saying, and they can fire me for that. The truth of the matter is, oral is speaking before you ever go. The truth of the matter is, you're right. He could have said this 24 hours ago. The police could have.
The police could have said, look, this is not going to concern us in any way, shape or form because of this statute of limitations, which means that it's no longer investigatable as a crime because it's more than 3 years ago. That would have finished it all off and gone, they draw a line under it, that's the end. They didn't say that. Why? Because I don't think they'd been told to say that because they didn't know there was a 3-year limit because there's now only just been one put on. That's the only explanation, isn't it? Ian says,
guys, I think we're reaching the general strike stage in the United Kingdom. People are genuinely hacked off with this, aren't
because
they?
The two-tier system that we are now living under, let's face it, is a problem for most people. If you get a speeding fine, if you get a ULEZ fine, if you get a parking ticket, they chase you to the ends of the earth to pay it, and they repossess your car. This guy can do anything and then change the law so that it wasn't actually a crime. I mean, what's that all about?
That's what we're saying.
That's what he's doing.
Wherever you are, wherever you are this afternoon, you're listening to talk. The assumption will be he's manipulated the law, our Prime Minister, to suit his own political ends.
Right, and he'll say it's nothing to do with me. That was the police's decision. Well, really? Are you going to seriously tell me that when people were told that they were going to go to prison for the maximum time when they were arrested over those summer riots, the government wasn't involved in telling the judiciary to throw the book at them? Of course they were, right?
It's just unbelievable. And just to put into context what I have to put up with, it's 4:30, the phones have gone down, and we keep calling, but apparently we can't hear anybody.
Yeah, we had that problem this morning.
Did you?
Don't worry, they'll fix it.
Will they?
They'll fix it
What,
soon.
7 o'clock?
No, they'll fix it. They fixed it quite quickly this morning.
0344 499 1000. I'm sure they are. I've forgotten the number. 499 1000. Jeremy, so the Met Police have announced that they won't do their job. So why are we complying with the laws that they say we have to?
Here's a question for the Metropolitan Police. Could they also explain to us which other rules and laws only have a 3-year waiting time so that we can find out maybe if there's something that we've done or we're about to do that might be an offence now. Maybe in 3 years' time it won't be. So all you've got to do is commit the offence, disappear abroad for 3 years, and you won't be done when you come back.
Not that we're condoning.
Presumably.
Not we're condoning, but just imagine if, you stole a car, right? And after
drive it to Spain.
Yeah, live in Spain, somewhere where nobody can see you or your car, and then come back in 3 years and 1 day, and you know what? They can't do anything about it. You can keep the bloody car.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
That's exactly what we're talking about. It's basically gerrymandering of the law. That's what it is.
When we start gerrymandering, I like that. When we started the show, we were also talking about the rage amongst people about the cancellation of local elections. I don't know, you would know this. 5 million people will be denied the chance in May to vote. Angela Rayner at it again, saying we're redefining boundaries and giving people...
Yeah, it's funny how they're doing it now, isn't it?
What, do you think it's because they're terrified that the British people are going to go, you're getting a right smacking, man?
Of course it is. Why are they doing it now? Why suddenly now? Why can't they say we'll do it next year or the next time there's a general election or the next time, we've had a year to actually prepare people for what they're going to do? Because it's happening in Sussex, for example, because Sussex has about 4 different, authorities that people live under, all of whom have got different bin collections, all of whom have got different administrations. I mean, how the hell is this going to be any better by putting them all into one big clump somewhere in the middle of Brighton, the most woke city in Britain? That's going to work out well, isn't it?
No, don't talk to me about Britain. Brighton. I'm still recovering from when I took over my daughter there. I'll tell this story very quickly. She said, we're going to go to Brighton University to have a look round. Can you try and not say too much? So I had to put up with two people dressed as they had tails and furry things, and a bloke in a tutu on a skateboard with a dog under his arm.
People.
But it's when I went to the loo and it said, I was looking for male and female. It said anybody welcome, so I had to pee in the car park. I couldn't bring myself to go in there.
No.
0344 499 1000. So you're not allowed to vote at local elections.
No.
Safeguarding of people who follow the law and pay their taxes being completely smashed to bits.
Right.
Prevent missing by a mile.
What about Valdo Calacane in Nottingham? You're not allowed to find out about his problem because it's an invasion.
Scared of needles.
An invasion of his privacy for us to find out what was going on.
It's a mass murderer.
Yes. And he could be released because some idiot in the future who's a doctor will say, oh, he's fine now.
Will he?
Let him out.
Yeah.
And this is why the families are so incensed, because he should have got a full life term. I don't care if he's a schizophrenic. Lock him up. Don't let him out ever. No. Right at the end. How is that difficult?
You have to be so careful even doing this show. A schizophrenic who's murdered 3 people, who refused to take his medication because he was scared of needles. Now, and Mike's absolutely right, that the NHS won't release the information about him because that could be disrespectful. So I go back there again without wanting to shout out every day. So what we're saying is a man who viciously murders 3 young students and that poor janitor, right, in cold blood.
Yes.
He expects us to respect that we don't want to know about his records. But what about the poor families?
Exactly.
Nothing.
No.
This is Starmer. This is the state controlling almost everything.
Now, there will also be people out there, right, who have paid fines, who have been punished for what they did during COVID times. You know, you remember all those people that were given on-the-spot fines because they were said to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Many of them managed to get the fines repaid, but a lot of them didn't, right? Have we got a 3-year break for them? Can they now get the money back 3 years later? I've not heard that.
And you would have thought, would you not, that Starmer would have been fined for being and seeing somebody during Tier 4, but apparently that's not going to happen. Now, Andy in Nottingham goes with you. He says, never mind what the police say, it's time to nail down on Starmer and get the truth. Just because he can't be charged, it doesn't mean we don't need to find out if he broke the law. I think that Russell's actually right when he said Farage will take this up. Farage will be all over this. He's talking this afternoon in that conference about how unfair it is that people can't vote. Of course he is, because Reform are blowing them all out of the water.
Of course, absolutely.
What about the same thing that happened with those Manchester police and those 2 Muslim men?
Right.
They threatened a private prosecution and everybody fell into place.
In fact, suddenly they were charged. I think we're still waiting for the trial, though, aren't we?
Yeah, I wonder whether he will try and bring a case against Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah. I wonder, because effectively, if Starmer has admitted that it happened, we know it happened, all we need to know now is, was it in breach of anything at the time?
This is from
which I think we know.
This is from a Northern Ireland veteran. Does it mean, guys, that veterans currently under investigation for charges from 20 to 30 years ago will be dropped, or is it just Starmer that gets away with everything?
Point.
That's a great...
Isn't it just?
And another one, a UK veteran, Jez, embarrassed of his country. I have a Prime Minister who is a complete and utter idiot. I am embarrassed. I was always taught, says Ramsey, that there was no statute of limitations in the UK, so where the hell has this come from?
Exactly. I mean, here's another case for you. What about Mohammed Al-Fayed, who Starmer also failed to prosecute, despite loads and loads of women going forward and talking to the police about what he was doing, right? They're now looking at the possible prosecution of some of the people that were around him at the time, but that was more than 3 years ago. How's that possible?
I've got the greatest question ever. I don't even know your name, thank you. This person says, when you consider the time and you consider the money, what's the bloody point of the COVID inquiry if it's after 3 years?
Well, very good point.
What a great point that is.
I didn't realise we were on a 3-year cycle. You know, so basically, maybe we could get him out in 3 years. Can we do that?
I don't know.
Have an election in 3 years?
Martin in Cambridge. Afternoon, guys. Regarding the local elections being cancelled, no taxation without local representation. Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely right.
I mean, Andy in Nottingham, this is really interesting. Never mind what the police say, it's time to nail down, right? This guy is a liar. People need to get the goddamn truth. I think Starmer is a disgrace. I think that
He's
today...
He's a compulsive liar, I promise you.
That today smacks absolutely of him manipulating the police and the system to save his bony backside. That's
absolutely.
The truth.
And to stop him from having to do what he said he would do, which was if he got a penalty notice, that he would resign.
Well, I ain't going to stop saying it, and neither are you.
No, absolutely not.
And the other thing, just before I let you go, because you work longer hours than anybody, do these politicians, seriously, we almost have this daily, Does he not know the anger that causes, or doesn't he give a damn? Because I don't
think he
get
gives a damn. I don't think he gives a damn. He thinks the people that vote for him and the people who don't vote for him are the same. They don't matter. You know, he's there to make a name for himself and to go down in history.
He is making a name for himself as a liar.
He is, absolutely right. One of the most, probably the most unpopular Prime Minister, I think, of all time.
What do you make of it? Mike's going home to bed. He's knackered. 0344 499 1000. Are the phones working, Ryan, or not? Unbelievable. Currently being fixed. We're going to stop the programme. Why would I say keep calling if you can't pick the bloody phone up? I'll tell you what, I need to be fixed. You can text 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Call the engineers. We're falling to bits. This is talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We line up on the home of common sense, Mike Graham, of course. Thank you to him for coming in again. What a legend he is. We were filming Plank of the Week. That's out at the weekend, but he's back tomorrow morning. Morning Glory with Mike, followed by Julia from 10. Ian Collins from 1 o'clock. We were just merrily getting on with the show when we were hit with that unbelievable breaking news at 4:15. Sir Keir Starmer, the liar, the Prime Minister who summons a voice coach to his offices on Christmas Eve. Quite wise not with his family. I'll let you make that assumption yourself. She's in a mask. She's teaching him how to be a bit more dynamic. 5, 4. Didn't work, did it? Because he's as boring as hell. Lots of uproar over the last 2 days. Going on in a minute. That was the Tier 4 restrictions. You got rid of Johnson, you hypocritical man, by saying he was eating cake and drinking this and doing that, and you were doing that. No, it's not the same. Today the police have just announced, the Metropolitan Police, that no action will be taken against Sir Keir Starmer because, are you ready for this? The alleged offences during COVID are outside a 3-year deadline for an instigating proceedings. So there's a statute of limitations to suit our Prime Minister, who is increasingly looking like a complete and utter liar. You can call, and we will get to you. Somebody's working on it. 03... Oh, it's working! We're going to Reigate. Charlie, hello.
Jeremy, how are you? Listen...
I'm raging, man, raging.
Well, listen, you'll be raving mad now. I'm going to hold my hands up, because in lockdown, I had the police round because it was my wife's birthday and it was her 50th. We had a silent disco, about 15 of us. My name's Charlie from Reigate. If anybody's listening, the Surrey police. Also, my brother was there, George. He was at the disco. He's just held his hands up. We was even in the Maldives. We listened to, I phoned one of your, one of the other radio stations. in the morning, and because we was on lockdown, and Surrey Police rang me the next day saying that I was going to get arrested because I shouldn't have been on holiday, even though we flew before the different zones were even announced. But look, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if 3 years later, if there's anyone from Surrey Police, Charlie from Reigate at a silent disco in my kitchen, and anybody wants to, any police officers want to speak to me about it, I'm sure you'd love to know about it, Jeremy.
Mate, I'm so with you. And on a serious note, one of the joys of doing this show is that you get calls and you do your show, and then all of a sudden there's news. And it happened this week with giving, migrants PlayStations and bloody driving lessons. And then it happened yesterday with the voice coach. And I'm just minding my own beeswax, and then this comes in. I think Mike's right. This government, right, Charlie, is redefining the bloody truth in this country, aren't they?
Do you not think migrants are entitled to a PlayStation? I don't know, mate. They do work hard. They was. I mean,
I can't
they
take.
do put the hours in, bud.
Mate, I can't take it. Listen, if you do get arrested, we'll get you off, because obviously you broke the law. Oh, no, hold on a second. You can't get off because you're not the Prime Minister. Charlie in Reigate, the man with the silent disco, we love you. Hello to Jeremy in Sussex, really. Now we've got 3-year care. Jesus, that's true. Peter Cox, Jeremy and Mike, remember, nobody is above the law. Well, that was supposed to be the case. What happened to that in this country? Jez, if 2-tier had a voice coach on Christmas Eve, I think he must have forgotten how to count 3 years. I absolutely agree with you. Hello to Rob as well. Spot on. Let's get rid of the civil service. Keir Starmer's a liar. So many of you getting right angry about this, and I completely agree. We started this show by talking about how safeguarding in this country, when you think about the Southport killer, he was missed 3 times by Prevent. Then you think about that vile schizophrenic Calcone who murdered 3 people in broad daylight. Apparently we can't release his medical records because that's against his human rights. Really, what about the human rights of those 3 people that were murdered, Starmer? And then we have the news that Starmer's not in fact going to be prosecuted for breaking COVID, despite many people, including our then sitting Prime Minister, receiving a fine. Unbloody believable. A very good afternoon, 4:45. She's arrived right in the middle of a firestorm. Alicia Fitzgerald, political correspondent. Are you on Zoom? You didn't bother coming in, woman. What's the matter with you?
Yeah, I didn't fancy it today.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you, apart from very angry?
It's the story that keeps giving, Alicia. I just struggle with this. You've got to I don't have to say it to you, but people are raging. Boris Johnson was set upon and absolutely removed from power for apparently allowing parties to take place. People having cake and a glass of whatever was appalling. There was that terrible picture of the Queen, and I get it, sat on her own during her husband's funeral. And then it turns out that our now Prime Minister got away with the curry and the beer night in Durham, but was actually being trained by a voice coach on Christmas Eve, who, by the way, I don't know if you know this, shocking news, was married to Robin Asquith, who starred in the soft porn series of movies Confessions of a Window Cleaner, Confessions of a Taxi Driver, coming out soon on Blu-ray, Confessions of a Prime Minister. I'm just saying. But today, Alyssa, in the middle of all of that, the Met Police, not the highest thought of organisation in the land, have said there will be... They're not speaking like Starmer, I don't know why I'm doing that. There won't be any legislation because the offences had a 3-year deadline for proceedings taking place. You have got to understand that people think this is a stitch-up.
Yeah, I think that the Met Police's statement is definitely going to cause some level of anger to people, because when there's a clear offence, there's a date attached to it and there's evidence. People will just say, really? Why can't you just give him a fine or give him some kind of sanction? We all know when it happened. We all know who it happened with. We know that he broke the rules. Should be pretty simple and straightforward. Shouldn't take up loads of Met Police time either, because I know that sometimes that's something that they say is an issue, so therefore they don't want to use...
Police time, what? Going round and that's the other thing today. Asylum seekers are being trained by local councils to report hate crimes. So if people say, you shouldn't be here or you're not very good at your PlayStation that we gave you free, the police will go round and deal with that, but they won't deal with kids being raped. It is beyond... Honestly, I find it astonishing. And the Starmer thing that I think is really interesting, and you from a political perspective will get this... Did he or did he not say, Alistair, if I am fined or found to have broken the law, as Boris Johnson did, I would resign?
Yeah, no, he did say that. I'm going to say something which I know some people will disagree with me, but I'm kind of playing devil's advocate and I'm going to say it because I think it's fair. The only issue I have with this, and I'm not saying for any minute that him breaking, a rule's a rule, he broke it, fine, and you shouldn't have different rules for other people. It was the wrong thing to do, and he's not taken the right level of accountability. The only thing I don't think is totally fair is comparing it to Boris Johnson, because the reason people were angry with Boris Johnson was because he was the person who made the rules. That is the only difference. Keir Starmer didn't make the lockdown rules himself. Boris Johnson did.
The only reason that argument falls down is, what about all the rest of us who got prosecuted and fined? Not me singly, but that guy who just rang for having his silent disco, had the Surrey police round. What about those people? Those people got fined and prosecuted and got a record, and they did not make the rules. I understand the Johnson thing, but I was also in this studio when Boris Johnson dared to say to Keir Starmer, you're having a go at me and I run Downing Street, fair enough. What about you as the Director of Public Prosecutions? You missed Jimmy Savile. I just feel like in this case there's a really good argument to say, you're changing the rules to suit yourself, and this does smack. I mean, the police might made a point. Alicia, love your take on this. When this first came out 24 hours ago, why didn't the police say, there's no point in complaining because it's past the 3-year juncture? They didn't. They said, we haven't done anything because nobody's complained. Then they were hit by a swathe of complaints, and now 24 hours later they're saying, oh, actually, it's after the 3-year deadline for COVID inquiries. That's why people are angry.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And also, just quickly back to your point about the Boris Johnson stuff, I do agree totally. What I mean by that is I get why people felt more anger towards Boris Johnson at the time, because he was the person standing there on the TV delivering these speeches saying, never stay at home, don't see anyone. That wasn't Keir Starmer's face wasn't attached to that. And whether you think that's fair or not, that someone gets kind of slightly different levels of punishment depending on whether or not they're in charge, that's a whole different story. But I do get why there would be two slight different degrees of anger there attached to this. But as you say, a rule's a rule. And I think this issue with the Met Police is they do have this kind of thing where, oh, if it was ages ago, we have to let it slide. And I think what they would use to defend that is to say, look, we have so many things to deal with now. We don't.
But you don't deal with anything. You don't deal with crime. You're too busy running around dealing with soft hate crimes and dealing with stuff that isn't relevant. Can I ask you from a political point of view quickly? Wish we had more time. There's also outrage today at the cancellation of many local elections. Around 5 million people will be denied the chance to vote in local elections this year. There are many people. I mean, Nigel Farage has just been holding a press conference at 4 saying this is an outrage. Trust me, he'll be after Starmer and that private prosecution in a minute. But let's talk about that. That also smacks of, we know Reform are doing really, really well. So the Tories and Labour are very happy for this not to take place. What happened to the democratic right of the British people of having their vote every however many years? What happened there?
And also, I think that local elections often get overlooked, but you actually forget how important they are. Like, this really has a lot to do with when your bins get collected, it's to do with your potholes, it's all of these things that actually really impact people's daily lives. So even though they're not on the news all the time and not everyone knows when they are, who they're voting for, it is really important, particularly more to rural communities who rely heavily on their councils.
I think there will be much anger. It's lovely to have you on again. I feel very confident that I've resurrected your career. And last time you posted something that I mentioned your boyfriend, James. Is it James?
Yeah, you're going to do it again now.
Well, no, you were in a red dress, he was in a red tie. How is the budding romance? Is it going well?
Well, he's good, but he's a bit scared that you're going to come to him in the middle of the night and put a bat up his nightdress now. So he now lives in fear. Does he?
He should live in fear because you're very important to us. And if he messes, he will understand the... I will bring the Metropolitan... Oh, they won't come round. They'll let him off. Alicia, you're a legend. Thank you for coming on 10 to 5 Talk Drive. We are across the UK, the home of free speech and common sense. David from Cheltenham, just I want to throw this in the mix to you. He says, if the cardboard cutout can cancel local elections, I bet the next thing he'll try and do with the police's help is cancel the general election. I have to say this to you, peeps, and some of you might think I'm going over the top. I think we're at a very important juncture in this country's history. I think we do have a government that wants to redefine, as Mike Graham brilliantly described, the truth to suit its own ends. And I think that is massively dangerous for the British people. This is Talk Drive.
Well, yeah, we do have an anti-Semitism problem, and the Jewish people in London have never felt less secure, less safe. And the reason we have it, most of it's coming from Islamists within the Muslim community. I mean, it's very, very straightforward. But you argue that that's a crucial thing. It isn't. There are only 300,000 or so Jewish people in the United Kingdom, and so Labour doesn't care one bit about what happens to them, as we saw previously under Jeremy Corbyn.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
5 to 5, we're live across the UK. Maggie says, two-tier Keir sits there this morning, so smug and knowing he'll get off. He's a smug, arrogant and a compulsive liar. Tony in Bournemouth, a very good afternoon. In the words of the great George Orwell, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Animal Farm, you could not be more right. Let's go to Sheffield, we're heading north. David, you're on Talk Drive. Good afternoon, sir. You've got 2 minutes, go.
Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm all right, not bad for a balding 6-year-old has-been. Crack on, what you got?
Right, just out of interest, a lot of upheaval, a lot of people unhappy with Keir. The King of England has the right to dissolve Parliament, am I correct?
Yeah, but he won't do it.
No, but he has the right to do that, yes?
He does have the right to do that, but he's a constitutional monarchy, so he won't.
Therefore, does the King think that Keir Starmer is doing right for this country?
I don't know, but I know that the King is quite, how do I put this politely, quite woke in some of his beliefs. Maybe he likes this compared to the Johnson era. I've no idea. But what I think is more important, and I don't think, I'm not knocking your call, David, I appreciate it. I'm sure many of us in this country wish he could. We're stuck with this. But what I think will happen, and I don't think it matters whether you've got a 186-seat majority or more, I think that when the British public turn on you, there is no way back. There's no accounting for PR. Whether it's, it started, I thought, pretty badly with the winter fuel allowance. It got worse with the farmers. This is blatant lying. Mike Graham makes a really salient point. The police could have mentioned 24 hours ago, right, that no action was being taken because it was more than 3 years. They didn't. This is a hatchet job. David in Sheffield, thank you. Voice note from Gemma, go.
So Starmer's offence is out of a 3-year window of investigation. How convenient. How convenient. I find it incredible how many laws suddenly appear to be there that help our officials in government. And I don't just mean the Labour Party, the others as well.
I couldn't agree more. Gemma, what's your vote now? 0344 499 1000 on WhatsApp. One more call before the news. West Sussex. Tony, you've got 2 minutes on Drive. Go.
I intend to cancel my direct debit tomorrow for my council tax. I don't know what the increase is going to be, but it's going to be at least 7%. I'm not going to pay it because Starmer promised there would be no increase in council tax this year. He said it, he emphasised it, that there would be no increase. So if they're going to give me an increase, I'm not paying it.
I don't need anybody to tell me, but I can't condone that. That's not my job. What I will say to you is, for all sorts of people, the length and breadth of this country, when they hear a government say, we won't do something, and then they do it, and then when they hear that 110 councils across the United Kingdom have admitted this week they've spent £141 million giving illegal migrants tools to make them feel better. And by that I mean driving lessons, yoga lessons, Pilates lessons, tickets to Premier League football matches and PlayStations. Then I understand people's anger, Tony. That's the point, isn't it?
The only final point I'd make very quickly is there were the Jarrow marches on London early in the last century. Why are we not, and when are we going to have, is someone going to organise a march on Westminster? I think millions would join it. There has to be a revolution in this country. We cannot put up with this lying man anymore and his cabinet. Everything they've said they do, they've done the opposite, and things they never even told us about, they've done. and it's all harming the people of this country. It is disgraceful.
And Tony, you know what's really interesting? 6 months ago, a year ago, a lot of people would have said, oh, he's deranged. You're not. You're talking complete and utter sense. To quote Patricia, Jez, I've never texted a show. Democracy is dead. We are now in a dictatorship. The only way is to kick all of Labour out. A revolution is needed. Some people will think that's outrageous. I understand people's sentiment. Nigel Farage from Reform already talking about how many people are being banned from voting in the elections. This is a proper socialist government. What do you make of it all, my friends? 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. I'm just happy that... No, I'm not going to do it. We've got the news at 5. More of your calls on the legend that is Peter Blacksley next on Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back, hour 2 of Drive for Wednesday afternoon. We're across the UK and Talk, the home of free speech and common sense, and increasingly the place that you can come to and say, what the hell is going on? When I started this show an hour ago, we were talking about how safeguarding seems to have gone out the window when you consider that the Southport killer was missed 3 times by the counter-terrorism group Prevent. He was free to murder those innocent children. Then you hear about how the NHS are refusing to release the details of schizophrenic Calcone, the man who murdered people in broad daylight, because apparently that's against his wishes and might disrespect him. Really? And then we're also in a country where we apparently are increasing council tax so that we can pay money to give asylum seekers the opportunity to have PlayStations and be made to feel good and teach them that if somebody is horrible to them, they can go to the police and talk about a hate crime. But all of that just disappeared. There was no significance when at 4:15 we had the shocking news that you'll have heard us talk about how Keir Starmer, 3+ years ago now, invited a young lady who was a voice coach to his house or his offices on Christmas Eve in 2020 to teach him to speak more inspiringly. Didn't work, because he still sounds like an idiot, in my opinion. I don't know if you heard him turn on the Christmas lights in Downing Street. Unbelievable. Anyway, people jumped on it and said, you must have broken the rules. That was tier 4. That's not acceptable. And he went, oh. 24 hours passed by. We said, why aren't the police doing anything? The police said, we need people to complain. At 4:15, the police came on and said, we can't actually prosecute Sir Keir Starmer, even if he did it, because there's only a 3-year window for COVID cases. We can confirm we've received a report, they say, the specific legislation that will be used by police forces dealing with the alleged offences during COVID has a 3-year expiry. I managed to read that 100 foot from me. So they can't initiate proceedings. A lot of you feeling quite hacked off with what you see as a stitch-up. And in fact, Mike Graham saying there seems to have been a redefinition of the truth across the United Kingdom. There's only one man to speak to that, a man who last night was very happy that Queen's Park Rangers won, but is now positively foaming at the chops. Peter Blexley, a very good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Can I ask you a question?
Please do.
So now there's a 3-year rule. So this is from Dan, who says, there is no such thing, Jez, as a 3-year window in law. Ask any current or ex-police officer. This has been made up to suit slippery Starmer. Peter Blexley.
I'm very, very pleased about this, because 3 years and 2 days ago, the same voice coach came to my house to give me some voice coaching.
It hasn't worked for you either, has it?
She said, stop sounding so South London, will you?
Yeah.
And get a bit more estuary English.
Right.
Neutral. You know, none of the above of which is true, but I'm sure it helps to have friends in high places. And now we're informed there is what we could call a statute of limitation on COVID offences. That's it. They'll all be put to bed. No one will be prosecuted, even if there is irrefutable evidence that they broke those laws.
But this is my point. Anybody with a brain cell, Pete, is going to go, you have manipulated the rules again. Boris Johnson, in fact, Alicia Fitzgerald made a point, I didn't agree with it, but it was a point that needed making, when she said, look, there was real widespread anger with Johnson. He'd made the rules and apparently flouted them. But you tell me the difference between, and I said this 4 years ago, there was a beer and curry night in a Durham constituency in some prefab, and Starmer was there with a beer and a curry, and oh no, that was work. Johnson had a piece of cake on the way from Cabinet Room to whatever. I'm not condoning what Johnson did, but you tell me the difference. He said, and I quote, if I get found guilty or given a fine, I will resign. Here's a question for you from the police's point of view. 24 hours ago, when we launched this story here and it was getting real traction, Mike made a really salient point. The Metropolitan Police said we cannot do anything until people complain. They did. Now they come out with this statement. Why didn't the Met Police, Peter Blexley, 24 hours ago say, there's no point in anybody complaining, the 3-year window's passed us by? Because he's lying.
I wonder how far down into the cabinet they had to delve before they found that 3-year rule, which of course smacks of convenience. Yeah. But of course, you see, those who prowl the corridors of power, those senior police officers these days, with their numerous degrees, many of them followers of the common purpose kind of cult, and all this kind of stuff which pollutes senior policing, they are more concerned these days with perception. How will it look, rather than policing? That's what they concern themselves.
All right, well, let's just say then, if their concern is perception and perception is reality, how do they think the average person in this country listening to this and finding out that today thinks? Because I'll tell you what they think. They think the police force is bent. They think our Prime Ministers are lying. He's bent as well. They think the whole system is devoid of the truth. That's what the British public think.
In other words, one system for them and one system for us. And that's why we have commonly used expressions like two-tier care, two-tier policing, and you only have to follow my timeline on social media to see the public responses to stuff I put out there. Policing's reputation is in the gutter, which is a deep, deep shame for the good, courageous men and women out there, keeping us safe, risking their lives, doing a wonderful job. But that is where the senior officers have got their police services, and that's where they've taken their reputations to.
Let me ask you a question. I don't expect you to. Oh, by the way, can we salute Kev in Southampton? He wants you to know, he said he's just in the last hour felt the sense of relief in the history of the world, because back in 1969, at the age of 10, he nicked a packet of refreshers from Woolworths out that big. He says, now I can stop worrying about that knock on my door, because it's actually, he said, it's actually 55 years, so he feels a lot better now.
Kev turned his life around, I'm very pleased to report.
He has. He's made a refreshing change to everything. Did you see what I did there? 0344 499 1000. What do you make of the police? Now, let's also talk about the police in the wider context, because, I mean, we talk, don't we, on this show about how when I was a kid, and you're much older than me, but when I was a kid, right, you were scared. The old Bill, you didn't want them to feel your collar. You didn't want them taking you home and knocking on the door. You were scared. Nowadays, to me, the police can't do anything. It's a bit like Premier League footballers. They seem to control the manager. The public and criminals seem to control the police. Let's talk about these asylum seekers. This was in the Daily Telegraph. Yesterday we had that astonishing story that a number of councils, Pete, across the UK had spent 141 million quid saying to asylum seekers, oh, we want to make you feel okay. So there's a games console or a ticket to a football match, or there's a yoga class voucher or a Pilates, and we're all going, Jesus Christ, today.
DJ lessons.
And learning to be in the circus.
Hey, asylum seeker, put a record on, I want it. My baby.
Oh, Jesus, we've lost the plot. DJ Peter Blexley coming to you at a club soon, only here. I don't know what's going on. On a serious note, though, and this is serious, today we read in the Telegraph that the police have also said to these asylum seekers that if people are horrible to them, maybe when they're playing their PlayStation game, say, you shouldn't have won that, oh, you've upset me, that they should report hate crimes and the police will make a priority of dealing with asylum seekers' hate crimes complaints.
Yes.
But we'll let our Prime Minister off from lying.
They are teaching these asylum seekers in these courses. I wonder how much the courses cost, by the way. They are teaching them how to report hate crimes. I wonder if they're scrolling through social media accounts and giving them examples of what Essex Police, for example, who have delivered some of this training, think constitutes a hate crime. I'm going to write to Essex Police and ask them if I can go on one of these courses.
I think that might be very interesting. Can I ask you something before we... Oh, hold on a second. Oh, this is going mad. Voice notes, you can hear. Tony the Man, you'll understand why I've done that in a minute. Tony the Man on Keir Starmer, go.
Commie Starmer and Net Zero Ed running this country, these socialists who hate the country. Also Angela Rayner, who's got the dress sense like, have you seen how she dresses? She looks like she's been dipped in glue and thrown through an Oxfam window. And that's the people who's running this country. They don't care about us. They're going to break laws. They're not going to stand justice because it's two-tier, isn't it? The police aren't going to prosecute him, obviously. It's just a socialist government. We need to get them out. They're dishonest. I hate them. We need to get them out now.
I think you understand how frustrated people are. That was Tony the Man, Peter Blexley, but understand creative ability of my team. This is Tony, the woman on Keir Starmer, go.
Really furious. I ain't even got no words for it. But at some level, there must be a way of knowing when did this law come in? Laws don't just come in. They will be dated. When was this 3-year law brought in? That's what Farage needs to chase him over. That's what we need to know. The slummy. I'm not even going to say no more words because I'm going to lose it.
Tony the woman. She's right. There's the optics.
It's a brilliant point.
It's
a
great
point, which needs putting to the Metropolitan Police. When was this enacted, this rule, this new law about COVID rules and laws? We need to know.
Do you believe it? Do you believe? I mean, you tell me you don't want to answer that question, but has it just out of convenience been dragged from somewhere, or is it actually real? Because it does. It's just so perfect, isn't it?
They've dug it out from somewhere because otherwise they wouldn't have said people make this allegation, and then the following day say, oh, actually, look. Here's a bit of paper.
So when they said we haven't done anything because we report it, you think they might have known this already, or do you think they scrambled around the minute they got complaints?
If there was half a brain within the organisation, they would have said there's a statute of limitations, so don't bother reporting to us.
But that's the point. 0344 499 1000. Peter Blexley with me. Can I move it on to something else? And I started the show differently today, and then we got hit by that tsunami of Starmerisms and whatever you want to call it. Prevent, this counter-terrorism organisation. Today we discover missed 3 times. Actually, I lie. Closed an investigation 3 times on that Southport killer, Axel Rudabikana. He was caught carrying knives. He was caught Googling mass shootings. And the horrific failings of Prevent to stop him have come out today. This is, again, an example of a government initiative, and I can't blame Starmer solely here. This was set up by other people, prevent patently failing. Thought it wise to allow this man, despite all their concerns, to walk free, and he murdered these people. And the reason I wanted to ask you that is because I also used the example of Falcone, right? Today we've got the NHS saying, well, I know he murdered 3 people in broad daylight, but we can't release his medical records because that wouldn't be fair. At what point does this country be fair to the people who deserve fairness?
First of all, I would like to commend those incredibly courageous parents and loved ones of Grace, Barnaby and Ian, because they are brilliant and they are not letting this go. One really big point that I would like to raise about Falcone and about, yet again, I firmly believe, we being failed, we the public, Falcone was not subjected to toxicology tests after he was arrested. They didn't do his bloods, OK? Right. Now, that is ludicrous. Any experienced, pragmatic detective, when faced with a case and people in custody, you look at all the circumstances, you take a bit of time, have a cup of tea and a biscuit, you're leading the operation, you go, right, what are the potential escape routes at court for this person? What kind of defence might they bring forward? And we are going to cut off those escape routes one by one. And that's what you do. And an SIO or any senior detective, any experienced detective on that team should have gone, well, he might claim he's mad. So let's do the drug tests to see if he's on drugs, which would then potentially and probably negate him being able to claim diminished responsibility.
So incompetence from the police or the system just what? What do you reckon?
Police, but bear in mind the previous night he'd visited a cannabis-using gangster in London. It wouldn't have been that much of a stretch to go, come on, we've got to do drug tests on this bloke in case he tries to claim diminished responsibility, which, of course, is exactly what he did. I suspect there is more to be revealed in that regard, and I hope, like the families do, and by crikey, they've suffered such unimaginable loss, bless them. They want accountability. They are not giving up. And we need people named. We need people sacked if they've been useless at their jobs. Same with Prevent and Ruda Bacana, coming back to your original point. OK, there was a young man obsessed with violence, researching it on the internet, taking a knife into school, being referred to the counter-terrorism programme, Prevent. I know there's a lot of concerns here, and yet you tune in, well, don't, but I've listened to it, so you don't have to. A lot of the left-leaning media, writers, broadcasters and this, that and the other, they love to say there was nothing that could be done. There was nothing that could be done. We don't have internment in this country, so there was nothing that could be done. In both those cases, Falcone and Ruda Bacana, there certainly was things that not only could have been done, should have been done. The nation needs to grow a spine.
I agree.
It needs to be able and willing to say, this person's dangerous, we'll section them, we'll keep them in a mental health facility for as long as it takes. This child is dangerous. If need be, they need to go into care, go into some kind of facility. Grow a spine, police, social services, Prevent, NHS. Otherwise, this bloodshed is their responsibility.
I completely agree. And I always sit here in awe of you, right, mate? And I mean that, because you're always honest about the police. My question after what you've just said is this. You use the word incompetent. And certainly if you look at Prevent and you go, so you missed this bloke 3 times. But then when you look at the NHS saying, oh, we're not going to release Falcone's records because that would be disrespectful. And then I hear things like he didn't want to take his medication because he didn't like needles. Is it incompetence, or does this come from the top? Are we now in a situation, it seems, where victims are trodden over and perpetrators, we find every goddamn excuse in the book to make excuses, it seems, for the Falcones, for the Axel Ruda Bacanas. And yes, you're right about the families who lost loved ones like that, their lives extinguished in a heartbeat. And yet we live in a society, and maybe it isn't just Starmer, maybe Prevent, maybe before that, we don't seem to look after those people. We don't seem to be able to be strong enough to the people who've committed these heinous crimes. We seem to be in a society where they search desperately to find excuses to say, oh, but he was mentally ill, or she was traumatised, or she was anxious, or he was this, or he had a bad childhood, or he had an impoverished childhood. that just disrespects everybody. Whoever came from an impoverished background, who's never had any money, who knows the difference between right and wrong. Have we got a cancer amongst our policemen and women personally, or is it from the top? Because I don't get it. I don't get it.
Tragically, it's both.
Yeah.
Ruda Bakana's name was misspelt on computers, which meant that certain things weren't picked up. That is incompetence, in answer to your question. Secondly, does it flow downhill? The kind of, most certainly, the wokery, the liberal attitudes, all that kind of stuff that flow down from on high within these organisations via their DEI departments that are sucking millions of pounds out of this economy and out of our public services. Yes, so it's both incompetence by some at the front line and utter wokery, liberal kind of nonsense, which results in young, beautiful lives being snuffed out.
And you do, and you, for me, there's the appalling irony of today's show is that we started by talking about how safeguarding, to me, lets down the majority, you called them yesterday, the silent, moderate majority, and seems to let us down and those people down, and yet we bend over backwards as a country and a society to make the lives of people coming here better. I'm getting to a point, and I've never been like this, where I'm beginning to believe that so much of what I believe is right, the very fabric of a society that I was taught was right growing up, is being slowly eroded, not just through incompetence, through this desire to be seen to be doing the right thing. And I think you're right. I think, where does that end? We have a Prime Minister who is a globalist, who's not proud of Great Britain. And ironically, on the day that we should be talking about the Southport killer and the failings of the police and the failings of the NHS over Callacane, right, and those people that died. No, our Prime Minister, the weasel human rights lawyer, is finding a legal way to get his backside out of the fire. And that, to me, tells the people of Great Britain everything they need to know about their leaders. And Nigel Farage will use this, quite rightly, because if you're not being stopped from voting, or you don't have confidence in the police, or you look at your divine leader, I don't call him divine, devoid would be a better word, and you see him getting away with it, you think, this isn't fair, Pete. Not fair.
And meanwhile, you have so many people in significant positions within the establishment who feel we should pay reparations for slavery. And the wokery goes on and on and on. And the fact that this nation manifestly does not have a spine, will not do everything that it can reasonably, lawfully, imaginatively, and there's a petard to hoist this lot by. Remember when David Blunkett was Home Secretary and he launched a serious and organised crime agency many years ago? He said he wanted that agency to be lawfully audacious. Well, where has that gone? Absolutely. Where do we see the police being lawfully audacious in their thinking towards Ruda Bakana and Valdo Callacane? Because that might have told very different stories, and tragically some who were snuffed out and taken from us might still be alive.
Couldn't agree more. It's always good to have you on. You've got 30 seconds. How was QPR last night?
Wonderful. We beat Blackburn Rovers 2-1 at home. Deep joy. I smiled all the way home.
From Thailand to talk to QPR, you had a good day.
I did, thank you.
And then you decided to wear that tie. I'm joking, it's lovely. The legend that is Peter Blacksley, thank you for being on Talk Drive, 5:22. We're across the UK until 7 on this vain attempt at a radio programme. 0344 499 1000. You can call, you can send a WhatsApp, or you can text me right now. It's 87222. Start your message with the word talk. I'm going for a wee. I'm back in 3.
You know, you can't tell me that a voice coach who has previously done everything on Zoom suddenly needs to come to London to give Keir Starmer an emergency voice coach lesson on Christmas Eve. I'm not buying it. It's absolute BS, isn't it?
I think that lots of people will be asking that. And also, just again, the way in which Keir Starmer campaigned on this with such confidence, as you say, it does suggest that lots of his anger and comments about COVID throughout 2021 and 2022 were somewhat overblown, to say the least.
Yeah, no question at all.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It's at 5:25. I'm delighted to welcome my next guest, actually, Peter Carwood, who's just said, I'm doing really well on Drive on a Thursday and Friday. You won't be here in a year's time, Kyle.
I was joking.
Were you?
You'll be here forever.
Well, I don't know. Listen, if and when the time comes that, you know, I am summarily brought into the boss's office and told that my time is up as an old man, I know that you will grasp the mantle. You even
well, you're nearing retirement age.
I beg your pardon?
You're nearing retirement age.
Yeah.
Clearly losing your
I'm
hearing.
Oh
far too old for you. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. Get your earplugs in. We're going to callers. Brighton, and you caller Nigel. You're on Talk Drive. What you got, pal?
Hey, good afternoon to you. Yes, yeah, for me, this today really marks a new low for the most dishonest, unprincipled Prime Minister we've ever had in history. I mean, this is a stitch-up, isn't it? Who've ever heard of a 3-year limit on prosecutions? But the reality is he can look smug. He can look smug because he knows that this story is nowhere on what I call the mainstream media. For me, you're the only media I ever listen to now, but that he got elected with only 20% of the population voting for him. And that's all he needs to vote for him again to get re-elected. And the fact that the mainstream media, the legacy media, is just not reporting this at all, he knows he'll be able to get in again.
Well,
when Boris was caught eating a bit of cake, how many weeks was that headlining the BBC? I reckon it was 3 weeks.
Actually, Peter's with us, Peter Carwood. It's true. So people can, I mean, we have Alexi on. People can jump up and down and say, oh, you know, I don't get one thing about this. If the Metropolitan Police haven't been forced or pressurised into this, why did they not 24 hours ago when they said, well, we can't do anything because nobody's complained? Why didn't they say at that point, Peter Carwood, there's no point in you complaining because there's a statute of limitations and 3 years has passed? This has been dredged up. And people like Nigel in Brighton, new caller, somebody who's just said, I don't listen to the mainstream media anymore because it's biased. I listen to Talk and I watch Talk, is absolutely nailed on. This, to anybody with a brain cell in the United Kingdom, is a bleeding stitch-up, a complete stitch-up.
It stinks of complete unfairness as well.
Lies, Pete, more than unfairness.
And the point that you prosecute people when something has gone wrong. A statute of limitations is something we don't usually have in this country for most crimes, or most alleged crimes anyway. And I think people will look back and actually just ask the very straightforward question, why did you need a voice coach to visit you on Christmas Eve, especially someone who had done most if not all of their voice coaching previously via Zoom? What's that about? Why did it need to happen? And if you look at the Brexit
Do you want me
remarks,
to make you smile?
Well, if you look at the Brexit
Do you know
remarks,
who she's married to? Married to? Robin Asquith. Do you know what he was famous for?
Tell me.
The series of soft porn films, Confessions of a Window Cleaner, Confessions of a Librarian, Confessions of a Prime Minister. I don't know. Why wasn't he with his family? I'm not actually being salacious like that.
I haven't seen those, but I know they're totally unrealistic films.
There's topless pictures of her in the Mail today.
Oh, right. It's totally unrealistic films, mainly about the time it takes to get a plumber to come around.
Brilliant. The truth of the matter is, Starmer, to people like Nigel, and thank you, Nigel, and to other people listening to this, is, and I thought Mike Graham used the most salient words. He said, a lot of people, Peter Carball, believe there is a redefinition of the truth in this country by this government right now.
There is. We're in a post-truth society, and there are lots of people who say, well, you know, we shouldn't, we may have done some things, but actually they weren't breaking the law. Beergate, a lot of people are still annoyed about. This is another element of things.
What's the difference between Beergate, this, and Boris Johnson? Because Alicia Fitzgerald said Boris Johnson made the laws. That's not an argument, because other people who didn't make the laws were also prosecuted. Am I right or wrong to say that?
Well, they're subject to the law, and also Keir Starmer says that he was Mr. Rules and he followed the rules at all times.
Did he say he'd resign if he was caught?
Well, this is the time when I think a lot of people will ask that question and say, maybe he didn't break the rules, maybe she broke the rules, maybe he broke the rules as well. We don't know, but we're not going to know, and the Metropolitan Police aren't going to decide on this, and no court is going to decide on this, and there'll be no fixed penalty notices, and there'll be no Sue Gray inquiry into all of this, because the Labour government wants it to go away and say, oh, it all happened in the past, this is all a distraction from our agenda and what we want to do. But the fact is, there are still many questions still to be answered, and they haven't been answered by Keir Starmer, and it doesn't look as if they're going to be.
Jim's in Cambridge. He says, ask Pete this, do you think the Mayor of London has stepped in and said to the Met Police, don't do anything about it?
No, they
really?
They have
defending him, Sadiq.
I'm saying that it's unlikely that he did that because he knows that would come back to bite him. The fact is, the Metropolitan Police have operational independence. They get the law and they implement the law. Of course, policing is political. We know there's two-tier policing in this country. Maybe people will sometimes see this as two-tier policing for two-tier care. Maybe that's how some people will see this. But I don't think Sir Sadiq Khan has lent on anybody in this. I think that's a very strong and allegation that I wouldn't give credence to.
Let's go to Eastbourne, where I'm going to retire with a blanket over my legs. A voice note from Ray. Go.
I am absolutely speechless and shocked and so upset over the Keir Starmer thing, having that at Christmas Eve. During lockdown, I couldn't see my kids, like a lot of people couldn't see their kids over Christmas and during lockdown. And this guy was having a voice coach. It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I had to video chat to see my kids during lockdown, and this guy was doing that.
It's a reality, Pete.
A lot of people were in that situation.
Funerals,
I remember
weddings.
My great aunt died. There were 14 of us at her funeral. That was not the proper send-off that she should have had. A lot of people made an awful lot of sacrifices. We heard there from that viewer who was talking about not seeing his kids. A lot of people the same way. There were Skype dads during the or Zoom dads during the pandemic. Why was Keir Starmer allowed to see this person? We didn't know about it until now, and a lot of people justifiably very angry about it. These questions aren't going to go away for him, but at the same time he's going to try to ignore them as much as possible, and you're going to see a lot of other parts of the media glossing over this.
Let's go to Bill in Telford. Bill, you're on Talk Drive. What you got?
Hello, sir.
Hello, come on, what do you want to say? Quick.
Hi, former soldier. I was in the Gulf in, 2002, whatever, commanding a repair team, and one of my soldiers had a reputation for telling tall tales. So any time a tall tale was referred to, it was then became referred to...
I'm really grateful for the call, Bill, but the line is so appalling. They get put through. It's really... You sound like you're swallowing your phone. Could you move your mouth back a bit, mate? Because it's really difficult to hear.
How's that? Is that any better?
Go back a bit more.
Is that better?
Yes, fantastic. You could be your phone in one room and you in the other. Start again, my friend, because I want to hear your story.
Okay. I was a soldier in the Gulf 20 years ago, and one of my soldiers had a reputation for telling tall tales.
Tory tales?
Tall tales.
Tall tales.
Yes, tall tales.
All right.
So any time a tall tale was being recited, it then became known as a Lenny, because that was a fella's name. So now, I suppose we could apply the same thing to Mr. Starmer, that at any time a tall tale is being told, it's Starmerism.
I don't disagree. Can I ask you, Bill, because Peter's far more balanced than me. I think this man's taking the out of the British people at the moment, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't trust him. I didn't trust his predecessor, Blair. And I'm obviously slightly younger than you by a year or two. So I remember the previous Labour government of the 70s where it was just absolute carnage. But, I didn't see Blair on the front line next to me with a gun in his hand.
Absolutely true. Thank you, Bill and Telford, the next soldier. I think also, if you put it on the human level, Pete, there will be a lot of people like our last caller who missed out on things. You made your point there, and will feel that he's taken advantage. Now, you've said, and you're the political expert. You said Labour will want to do this, but hold on a second. You were really, really, really strident, Sir Keir, and all of you about Boris Johnson.
Look
I
back.
don't give a damn about 3 or 4 years. I don't care about policy units. I don't care. I care about this. This is, you've upset all the pensioners, and that's your poll tax moment. You've upset farmers in a desperate land grab to lower the price of electricity, which will treble the price of electricity. And now you're saying that I am better and above the law, and I will do whatever it is to get away from something that I thought my predecessors should fall on the sword for.
Look at all the times, and we'll play these, and we'll look at these. Look at all the times Keir Starmer said it's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us. We followed all the rules all the time. Well, it looks as if you didn't, actually. It looks as if you encouraged someone, you invited someone to come to break Tier 3, Tier 4 lockdown rules. It looks as if that has happened. So if that has happened, where you were wrong then and you're wrong now, but he won't confront this. He wouldn't answer a question on it yesterday at NATO, for example.
And let me ask you this as a political nerd, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Do they just assume this will go away? Because so this is what I'm going to say, and we've worked together a couple of years. I understand political strategy to a degree. And I understand the mainstream media won't report this because Keir Starmer, to many of them, is from Islington and he talks sense, and we should be doing all these things that most people think.
Should be grateful to have him as Prime Minister, Jeremy.
Really?
No.
You sound cynical, not surprisingly. But when you look across the pond at a man, like him or loathe him, and there's much wrong with Donald Trump, and I don't agree with everything he says and does, but he said, this is what I would do, and if you elect me, I'll do it straight away. This country is fed up of being taken for an idiot. I promise you that's what the British people are thinking. It's everywhere. I went to a petrol station down on the south coast this morning. I mean, I've never spoken to this bloke. He went, love you on talk, Jez. What? He said, and Nigel Farage is the only person in this country that's speaking our language, and I voted Tory 30 years. We have to get these skanky socialists out. People feel this.
Well, a lot of people feel there's something in that, because a lot of people feel that, and they feel they're all the same. And the fact is that Keir Starmer had a high moral high ground and said, oh, it's one rule for them, it's one rule for the rest of them. They broke lockdown. Look at the Sue Gray report, that senior civil servant who did that report, who then became Keir Starmer's chief of staff. Actually, now it seems anyway, from this reporting, that Keir Starmer did basically the same thing. So where's the moral high ground there?
Well, talking about morals, and I know you absolutely won't want to answer this, what's the voice coach doing on Christmas Eve?
Coaching him.
Orally. Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 20 to 6. Can I abuse my position as the host of this show? Well, the host at the moment, according to Peter Carble, is with me because apparently I'm going to be cast aside to that place where old people go and sit.
No.
Yeah, it's fine. I can
you
do
were the
it.
one who said you wanted to see your days out in Eastbourne.
Well, one day I'll sit there with a blanket, but I've much to live for, including two wonderful young children. Oliver and Iris are in the car and they're listening right now. And Ava says she loves you both. So listen, Ava's with me. 20 to 6. They're in the car. Say hello to Oliver and Iris.
Hello, Oliver and Iris.
God, you're so
Hello,
not
Oliver,
paternal,
hello.
are you, at all? It's like the scary man.
Well, even
Don't accept some sweets from him, kids.
Well,
That's
you were
truth.
the one who just gave me your clammy M&Ms.
I've always said you wanted my... No, I'm not doing it. 0344 419 1000. Are we going to the phone lines? What's going on with my team? Jez, so that is the end of cold cases, says Roy in Southampton. Democracy is over, says Mick in Wallington. This is now a dictatorship and all Labour voters should be ashamed. That's very interesting. Hello to... who is this? Brad. He says, Jez, I would love to see the legislation that states there's a 3-year limitation on prosecution so that we can see what date it was written. Anyway, surely, or even, Starmer should at the very least apologise for breaking the rules. Not going to happen, is it?
No, he's not going to. He's not going to say there's evidence. He's not going to admit that he broke the rules, so there's not going to be any apology that comes, and he knows that there won't be any police action now because of this statement from the Metropolitan Police. But what we have to remember is that just because they're not going to prosecute doesn't necessarily mean the rules haven't been broken.
But that, I mean, he's surely going to... How can you get... Oh, it's going to wind me up.
It's winding up a lot of people, and it's crazy, and it beggars belief that you don't have the same rules, the same laws applying to everybody forever.
Well, this is interesting. Christine on the Isle of Wight. Do you want my Isle of Wight joke?
Go for it.
What's brown and steamy and comes out of cows?
Tell me.
The Isle of Wight ferry.
I like it.
Lovely. Christine says, presumably our beloved BBC, the British Biased Broadcasting Corporation, won't do a Partygate-style documentary on disgraceful Sir Keir Starmer. I don't think I'll hold my breath, but they sure as eggs went for Boris Johnson, didn't they? It's true, isn't it?
I'm just on the BBC app at the moment, and I don't see any reference on the front page to this.
No.
I don't see any reference.
No, but we'll be saying that we should give asylum seekers games consoles and tickets to football matches. I'm losing my mind. We're going north to Northampton. Do you see what I did there?
See what you did there?
Tracy, you're on Talk Drive. 2 minutes. What you got, my darling?
Right, what I've got is, you had somebody on and about, they were saying about that the King could step in and get rid of Keir Starmer, which is a brilliant idea. So what I'm thinking is, we're all, like, ringing up you and we're all complaining about Labour. Come on, Labour, get rid of him. Do you know what I mean? We don't want him. They're not listening. They're not listening.
They don't need to listen. They've got a majority. They can do what they want for 5 years.
Yeah, I know. So what I'm trying to say is, are we barking up the wrong tree? Should we go for the King now?
King can't do anything. I don't want to disrespect anybody. I love the fact that you call and I love the positive thought. It is a constitutional monarchy. I know this better than anyone in this building. The old man worked for the royal family for 41 years. He is a woke king, by the way. He is left-wing. That is not left-wing, but he's probably...
He's tree-hugging environmentalist.
I love all the people coming. It's lovely. Ooh, I don't even know what I'm doing. Lovely.
It's not a bad impression.
I've said to my mother, well, I used to, unfortunately no longer here, that I wanted to care for all the people in the country. Brilliant. Fact is, he won't, he can't, I mean, he can, but he won't, Tracy. I'm not being disrespectful. He won't do it, because the minute the monarch gets involved in politics, we change the whole game plan, don't we, Pete?
We do. Yes.
Well done for involving yourself there, Pete. Let's go to North.
That's it. I should say the BBC have an article saying...
Oh, stand by, shock horror.
No police action over Starmer voice coach claims, but it's not on their front page. You would imagine this would be a front page story, but it's not.
Can I just say, years and years and years ago, well, 3 years ago, when I started this show, I had a young lady working for me that made Jodie look okay. I'm joking, Jode. Verity Wishart, who is now reading the news on ITV in the channel lines. Just text, she's listening. We love you, darling. We miss you. She's doing so. You see what can happen? I'm still stuck here and she's back reading the news for ITV. You see what happens?
That's it.
It's called helping people with a career. Like I've helped you, Ryan and Jodie.
You created Ryan.
Before I didn't create Ryan at all. He's far too big for me. Let's go to North Wales. It's Brave versus Labour control. Colin's there. Hello, Col.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad. What do you want to say, my friend? Peter Cardwell is here with me now.
Right, okay. So you had a gentleman on earlier on
yes,
saying that his council tax is going up by that 10%, 15%.
Yes.
Yeah. And he said that he's not going to pay it.
Something I can't condone, obviously. Yeah, crack on.
Well, I can't condone it. You can only condone what you actually do yourselves. Therefore, I actually do condone the fact that I am not going to pay the 10% rise that they're going to put on me in North Wales. Oh, and by the way, I've been arrested for saying you are wrong, very wrong.
What's he been arrested for? I can't hear him. Thank you very much, T. Colin. What did he say? Been arrested for what?
I didn't quite make that out.
I don't know. Ryan's now going to talk over me. It's going to be a complete mess. But what he's basically saying is this is the second call we've had this hour. I'm not paying my council tax. There's a furore going on across the country as well because
people
they
are just really, really annoyed.
Well, he looked down the camera, didn't he, Stalin, and he said, there will be no... No, he went, there will be no
I think you mean Starmer rather than Stalin.
No, I meant what I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, the farmer harmer, granny harmer,
well,
two-tier Keir?
He's supposed to be Mr. Rule of Law. He's supposed to be Mr. Rules.
No council tax rise. Now it seems that Angela Rayner is going to allow, I think, about 7 or 9 councils to increase it. These are the councils that are skint. But this, my friends, and it is not for me to say you should do or not do, it's not my rules, right? You can pay your you should pay your council tax. If you don't, that's your business and you'll face the consequences. Or maybe you could wait 3 years and hide and it won't happen after today's news. But on the back of that, we hear £141 million of council tax money is being spent on asylum seekers having games consoles, and you understand why people are hacked off, right?
Having games consoles and also going to workshops to learn coach them how to complain about hate crimes. I mean,
to learn to be clowns and learn circus skills. Do you know that?
You almost couldn't make it up. You almost couldn't make it up. It is. I think there's so many hard-working taxpayers who say, I put into this country, I followed the rules. And the question I think a lot of those people are asking, as well as in regard to their council tax, TV licence is another one, where people say, I follow all the rules, right? Yep. I do all the things I'm meant to do, right? I work, I pay my taxes, I don't break the law, I don't do any antisocial behaviour. And what's the what do I get back for that?
Nothing.
What's the benefit?
You're 8th in the queue, by the way.
You're 8th in the queue, and there's potholes. You can't get a place, you can't get a GP's appointment, you can't get a place for your kid to go to school, you can't get, housing.
Yep.
There are so many people who play by the rules who are saying, hold on, what about me?
And do you know what's more important about what you've just said, and I absolutely and utterly agree with everything you've said, I've been saying it for weeks, is it became easy for the loony left, or what I call the bedwetters, to say, that's just the racist ramblings of the far right. Moderate, mainstream Britain, who pay their taxes, have never broken the law, have never asked for a handout, jams, just about managing. They are not racist and they are not far right, but they are going, hold on a minute, hold on a minute here.
Yeah.
I can't buy my kids a new pair of shoes, and you can come here from France and end up in a hotel and get a come stage is fundamentally wrong.
Could this
possibly
be to do with the many million people in this country? That is not a racist thing to say. That is a perfectly reasonable thing to say.
Our public service is a shot to invite another million and screw everybody. Let's go to Croydon, which is brave. Nick, you're on Talk Drive. What you got?
Well, I hope you're well. Maybe the police willing to step in, but surely the Bar Council can. Maybe the KC, a barrister, he is a member of the Bar Council, and there be something with the Bar Council rules about its members not acting
That'd be very interesting.
I had a KC who represented me for 6 years and was absolutely amazing. You've given me a great thought. I'm going to call him tomorrow. Makes a really salient point.
Disrepute is something you can't get someone disbarred. That will be
lowering the
bar.
Let's get him thrown out from the bar. We'll try that. Can I just read this though before we wrap up? And it's been great to have you on. From the bar, people will go, "Oh, you're just being unfair." No. During COVID, many people suffered. Listen to this. No. I couldn't carry my dad's coffin chairs due to COVID rules. He got wheeled in a trolley to his grave, and it broke my heart. The Lees in Manchester saw the Queen, that figure of her sat on her own, and read and heard the media talk about what Boris Johnson had done wrong, and rightly, that was his downfall. There is no difference between this current Prime Minister, the leader then of the opposition, bringing a woman to wherever to teach him how to speak better when the entire country was on tier 4, certainly where he was. There is no excuse for that. It is no better. It is exactly the same. And this is another, I don't care what anybody says, this is another nail. There is, the heating things is poll tax moment. This, you know politics far better than me. There is a point at which the Labour Party, the MPs, the powers that be will go, mate, they're not having you anymore. And it gets worse for him every week, and it is of his own design.
Can't disagree with any of that.
It's great to have you on. You're doing Drive tomorrow?
No, Friday.
Oh, who's doing it tomorrow?
Alex Phillips.
Oh, the audience will be all right tomorrow then. 0344 499 1000. Peter Cardwell on Friday. Alex Phillips tomorrow. Jeremy Kyle after the break. This is Drive.
This is, I think, about putting pressure on all sides, basically, to behave. I mean, obviously...
You think it's one of his negotiating positions?
They're not actually going... Gaza is not about to become the 51st state.
That's Canada.
Yeah, well, it depends who wants it more. That's not going to happen. First and foremost, it's about putting a bit of pressure on Israel, about saying to the Israelis, look, you know, if you're not going to play nice, then we can just do what we want with this. We are big and powerful enough. But the whole thing about relocating people out of Gaza to the rest of the Arab world is also about saying to them, and you're going to have to play nice too.
Minutes to 6. Welcome back. Push the button, Ames.
Sport Summary on Talk.
So I've got rid of Sam Ellard. He's crap. We've got Anil is back. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you.
Talk
Always
Sport
a pleasure.
Presenter Anil Kandala just asked me about a young lady. Well, I'm not going to that. Carabao Cup semi-finals tonight. I was at the St James's Park Saturday with my mates. Toonami losing to Fulham. They're all talking about tonight a semi-final. Newcastle sniffing distance to another Wembley appearance, getting nearer to winning that cup under Eddie Howe, leading 2-0. Real fear after Saturday's Saturday's game. You know, are Arsenal going to come out to try and stop an early goal? You make a really good point. If Newcastle use the support and score early, it's over, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think it's a combination of a few things when it comes to the nerves of Newcastle fans, as you've already alluded to. The weight, the trophy drought is, of course, in the back of their minds, and they only got to the very same competitions final a couple of years ago where they lost against Manchester United. So I think they've got a feel for it. I think they'll feel a lot more confident if they do get to that final. And look, they're at home. They're in the most perfect of circumstances when it comes to...
And Arsenal have no strikers, by the way. Let's make the point. Saka's out. Who else is out? They're all out, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Jesus is carrying a bit of an injury, and I think the Arsenal fans aren't too happy they didn't bring anyone in that position in the January transfer window. But yeah, both games, of course, today and tomorrow, Newcastle-Tottenham, both live on talkSPORT. I think it's going to be a cracking game, and I'm with you, Jeremy, not just because of your friends in that part of the world, but Newcastle are a brilliant club, and it's been far too long since they've lifted some silverware.
Tottenham tomorrow away to Liverpool. I don't see Tottenham holding on to that at all. In fact, I'll make a prediction that Liverpool trounce Tottenham tomorrow and he's sacked, and Postecoglou, because I think he's only there because of this.
I think that is bang on the money there, Jeremy. I think if they were going into this game 2-3 goals down, I don't think that we would be talking about this game with Tottenham with Ange Postecoglou at the helm. Of course, they've got an advantage. That is something to take away. I think the first leg was a very hard-fought victory. They deserved to win that game, but only a one-goal lead going to Anfield, I think anyway, the hardest ground to get a result in under the lights, probably in Europe. So they'll hopefully be on the cards for a miracle and can set up a Newcastle-Tottenham final, and one of their trophy droughts will end. But as a West Ham fan, Jeremy, I assume that you're hoping that Liverpool get to the final.
As a Man United fan, I'm hoping you think you won't be relegated. I see you put on social media that I asked you the question about Man United.
Jeremy.
Man United not there at all and having a terrible time, Man United. Do you want to talk about that?
This wasn't on the agenda, Jeremy, so I'm a little bit upset.
Listen, on a serious note about West Ham, I feel Graham Potter will I think will make a big difference the next 6 months. They're not going to be relegated. Let's see what he can do. And Manchester United, I read an interesting article actually by Gary Neville today saying he really fears, because if you're waiting for the Amorim experiment to work, people get restless, and if they lose more games and finish 15th, 16th, as you said yesterday, interesting times. However, for those who think we only talk about football, England, 3 one-day internationals in cricket in India, the return of how has he not been in this team? Joe Root back at number 3 in the one-day team, where he should be. One of our greatest ever batsmen.
Absolutely. I think certainly of my generation, I'm struggling to think of anyone who's been a focal point really for England. He's been the height of success for this team, and of course in this new era, the Brendan McCullum era, I think these types of individuals are so necessary, not just for performances on the field but also around the camp.
Yes, in the dressing room.
Exactly, they're imperative in order to have success. So I'm sure Joe Root will be very desperate to get his return back to winning ways in India.
And rugby, of course, this Saturday at Twickenham, England, France, obviously going to be smashed. Now there's this case of the two Smiths. There's Finn Smith and Marcus Smith, and how does Borthwick, who I think's under pressure anyway, Marcus Smith, this is ludicrous, is going to start at full-back. The greatest fly-half in this country, and Finn Smith starts at fly-half, just to get them both in the team. When will England learn? That's rubbish, man.
Do you know what you said there, Jeremy? I think we can almost clip that up and put it as a soundbite for every England team across all sports. It's just confusing upon confusing, and like you said, there always is mounting pressure, isn't it?
Play Finn Smith off his arm at number 13. What is wrong with you people? Obviously, Steve Borthwick's under pressure, not that Brendan McCullum is. So we've got a couple of minutes. What are your other sports that you love talking about?
I think
let's talk about Manchester United. No, I'm joking.
Well, look, of course there are a few sports that I do like, but I think one big story today, Jeremy, is the certain Cristiano Ronaldo who turns 40 years of age.
He's past it though, isn't he? As a footballer, look at his body's gone to crap. He's all got. Look at Jodie's turn round. Jodie, myself or Cristiano Ronaldo naked? Let's talk about this. She's laughing.
Well, I think it's a very, very clear answer here, Jeremy, on your show. So, of course, Jeremy Kyle. But look, this individual, he's done an interview recently with Spanish TV, and I've got his quotes here. It says, "I think I'm the most complete player to ever existed. In my opinion, I think it's me. I do everything well in football." This is an individual. Look, I understand the
self-confidence is important.
Self-praise is no praise on one hand, but on the other hand, if someone like Cristiano Ronaldo can't be very happy with his achievements in the game, then I don't think any of us can be happy.
This is a serious question, genuinely, as a Manchester United fan. Was he wrong to go back? Because it wasn't quite the same, was was it?
I think he was wrong to go back at the timing of what he did. When he joined Juventus from Real Madrid, I thought that would have been the perfect moment for him because he would have offered a lot. But given the circus that's around Old Trafford at that time and going on now,
there.
exactly. Yeah. So I think it does not necessarily tarnish his legacy, but there is a bit of a sour taste in the mouths of some Manchester United fans.
An extraordinary individual, by the way.
Yeah.
And actually, I interviewed I know Ferguson, and we've talked about that before, but he would say that this guy trained harder, lived healthier, worked and believed more than any other player, and sometimes the very best.
Yeah.
It might be natural talent, but they hone it and they never give up working to make that better, right?
And I think that's an inspiration to anyone out there chasing their dreams. You know, when he obviously has the inevitable comparison with Lionel Messi, I think when we're talking about just raw talents and ability, God-given ability, if you like, Lionel Messi is clear. But as you've just said, all of them attributes, trying your best, making sure you're hitting every single box as quick and as hard as he can. Absolutely. He, for me, is the greatest that's ever lived. So,
and you are the greatest sports person. Sam Elard, you're fired. Neil, thank you very much indeed. We'll let you know what happens. Of course, Newcastle, Arsenal tonight. Come on the tune! We want Newcastle, Tottenham to fold and Newcastle to win the cup. We're almost at 6. You got the news on the way. That was the sport. More of your calls coming up. We have the amazing Brendan O'Neill from Spiked out of the news at 6. 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. You can text me on 87222. Start your message of the word talk. As I go for a wee, you get the news at 6 next on Talk. Ta-ra! Good evening to you. Just gone 6 o'clock, hour 3 for Drive. Ahead of Kev O'Sullivan, the legend that is Kev O'Sullivan. He'll tell you that. He's here with his political asylum from 7 o'clock. Ahead of that, if you want to be on, 0344 499 1000, our telephone number. You can get us on WhatsApp and leave a voice note, same number, 0344 499 1000, or you can text 87222. So many of you so angry about the news that broke about 4:15 this afternoon that Sir Keir Starmer, it was reported 2 days ago, had some female, Leonie Melinga, come to his offices on Christmas Eve in 2020 when London was under Tier 4 rules, which meant nobody was allowed to do anything. But she went with the face masks to teach him how to speak better, which obviously didn't work because he still sounds like an idiot. Boris Johnson was hounded by the mainstream media out of office for eating cake, and that vision of the Queen sat alone. I get it, completely and utterly right that he had to fall on his sword. However, Keir Starmer, the very man who said that politics will be different, I'm this, I'm that. Well, if I ever did anything like that, I'd resign. Caught with his trousers down, right? Today, the Metropolitan Police, who yesterday said we can only do something if people complain, announced at 4:15 that no action will be taken because apparently Starmer's alleged crime took place outside the newly convenient 3-year window. As Sue says, during COVID, a very dear friend of mine had a bleed on the brain and her husband wasn't able to go into the ambulance with her. She died alone. Our Prime Minister is a despicable liar. Deborah, I'm gobsmacked. Jez Starmer is immune from prosecution. One rule for them, one rule for us. No one wants this man or his bloody party, but we have to keep paying and suffering. Please, Jeremy, answer the question. What can the electorate do to get them out? Deborah in Essex, you can't. The Labour Party might get him out. Sadly, we're stuck with this piece of whatever for the next 4 years. Hello to Ellen Rowe. Ellen, I really appreciate your message. It's been 4 years just since my husband died, and same as the previous caller, I didn't see him for 4 weeks before he died. Trolley and 9 at the funeral. I'm still suffering the trauma of this, and Starmer gets away with it. And before actually I go to the calls, Chris, not about COVID, just generally, and this would sum up what many people think. Hi, Jez, it's Chris, a disgruntled van driver currently out earning my pittance to pay for the PlayStation roll for the migrants. I'm treating myself to 5 days in Poland. Let's see how the other half live in March. Keep up the good work, mate. Do not give up the fight. I won't. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Manchester. Kay's a new caller. You're on Talk Drive, Kay. Couple of minutes. What you got?
Good evening. Just wanted to say that according to the statutory limitations on the COVID rules, which came under the health protection or coronavirus regulations, the window was 6 months. So the offences that Boris Johnson and everybody else were actually charged with had a window of 6 months, and they were conducted in June, when his birthday was, and in April of 21. This didn't come to light until the end of 21, which is basically outside of the 6 months.
We could get bogged down in the specifics, but here's what I would respectfully suggest is going on here. We started our show, Kay, talking about how safeguarding seemingly misses the point so much in this country. The Southport killer was missed by the police 3 times. That horrible, vile Calacone, as some will say, had schizophrenia, was allowed into the community. He didn't like taking his medication. Today we find that the NHS won't release his medical records because it could disrespect him. 6 people taken, murdered in cold blood, and a system that seemingly protects the perpetrator and does nothing for the victims. And then people wake up and they hear that we're having our council tax increased to pay for, illegal migrants to get lessons in whatever, yoga, Pilates and tickets to football matches. And then you see that our Prime Minister somehow manages to conveniently convince the Met to drop something that another Prime Minister lost his job for. And you wonder whether the truth, and I thought Mike Graham was so spot on earlier, the truth is being redefined in this country, isn't it? To suit the ruling class. That's how I see it. And I've never thought I would speak like that.
But it's not 3 years, is it? It's a straightforward lie, because at the end of the day...
It's all a lie. It's all a lie, mate. It's all a lie.
But if you want to use that, then they should be dropping what they've done already. They shouldn't be they should be rescinding the charges that they did to all the people that weren't prosecuted within 6 months.
Completely agree. Kay, thank you. Let's go quickly to Angus. John, you're on Talk Drive. What you got?
Listening to your programme driving up from Northamptonshire this afternoon, and I was initially angered by what you were saying. But now I get so far back and I'm absolutely heartily sick and tired and sorry for what the state of this country is now. We've got a leader who supposedly is standing up for law and order and everything else, and all those people who fought for this country over the years and died for law and order and democracy. And this chap is just having a gin and tonic tonight, probably having a laugh, how he's got out of it again. I think it just makes me sick.
Why were you initially angry with what I was saying?
Well, I just thought, well, initially angry because, you know, the various things about the subjects you were talking about, of how people seem to get off with things.
They do.
Lefty lawyers and have done a thing where 18 billion, and does anybody realise how much 18 billion is?
Absolutely.
It's been given away when it could be used in this country.
I think it's about, John, with respect, and I think you make a really good point. I think it's about priorities, and I can only say something, and I will keep saying this until I'm dragged out, right? I will no longer accept people like Starmer, who apparently consider themselves to be intellectually superior to all of us, telling me that, you know, Britain is a caring, humble society that should apologise for its past and do everything to help everybody in the world. And I'll tell you why I won't accept that anymore, because that's fine when you're not skint. What I will stand here and talk about is, as Peter Cardwell said half an hour ago, John and Angus, people who have never broken the law, have paid their tax, have done everything right. They've never had a handout, the jams, the just about managing, who ring this station in their droves every day, and they say the following thing to me, John, and everybody else that's on the station. Why do we live our lives correctly when we're eighth in the bloody queue behind people who come on a boat or people who commit heinous crimes? Why are we being treated by our government as second-class citizens? And I completely agree with that, mate. I can't disagree with that. Do you understand that?
Really. It just sickens me and saddens me, really. It really saddens me.
It does. Listen, great to have you on, John and Angus. Thank you very much indeed. 6:10, 0344 499 1000. Our next guy, what can I say about our next guest? Lovely having him on a Wednesday. Bit late today, I thought. I think Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer of Spiked. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Jeremy. How you doing?
Well, you see, this is how I'm doing. It's been a weird week. I find this show in sometimes it makes me so mad, but it's also cathartic because I get to be able to realise that it's not just me. We heard and saw Keir Starmer during the election campaign look down several cameras and say council tax won't rise. And this week, Angela Rayner decided that she would in fact allow all these bankrupt councils who spend their millions on loony things to increase their council tax. And then, of course, came the story of all stories. We started with the voice coach. We then went to the asylum seekers, £141 million this week of money being spent on, and this isn't a joke, you know, asylum seekers getting yoga classes and Pilates instruction and going to Premier League matches. And that was bad enough. And then you come in today and you hear about the failings of the Met Police and the NHS to safeguard British citizens whilst wiping the backside of, you know, illegal migrants. Whether people like this language or not, it's true. You know, today we read in the Telegraph that the police are spending their time saying to illegal migrants, look, if people are nasty to you, come to us. Forget if you're raped as a child in Rotherham. That can take 8 years, but you come to us. And then, just 15 minutes into the show, Brendan, we discover that the Prime Minister is no better than Boris Johnson. He's a liar. He's manipulated the system, and I don't know whether it's gutless Met Police or I don't know who it is, and now saying we can't prosecute him because it was more than 3 years. The people of this country are beginning to sense a massive stitch-up, Brendan. Genuinely, I mean that.
Yeah, I think Keir Starmer and the rest of them, all of them in government, they don't understand how much people hate it when it seems to be one rule for them and another rule for us. And that is so clearly what this illustrates. You know, all the technical discussions, we can't charge him, it's too long, statute of limitations, etc., whatever. I don't even care about that. What I care about is the fact that they instituted, by which I mean the Tory government, but supported by the whole establishment, they instituted a severe lockdown during the pandemic, which we were all forced to abide by. If we didn't, we could be fined £10,000, £20,000. You could have your life wrecked. And many people did have their life wrecked for having a party or for meeting friends. And yet they were all at it. Boris Johnson was having his cake, Keir Starmer was having his voice coach, that bloke from Imperial College was getting his leg over with his lover and crossing London to do so.
Is that Ferguson? It was, wasn't it? Ferguson.
That's right.
That's it, yeah.
And they were all at it. They were breaking their own rules while punishing us if we dare to do the same. Starmer misunderstands at his peril how much that sickens ordinary people.
And it's interesting because somebody actually, and I'm glad Alicia Fitzgerald said this because it's important to look at all sides. She said, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Do you think it was worse, she said to me, for Boris Johnson because he made the rules and was seen to flout them? No, I think that was a mainstream media stitch-up because Boris Johnson wasn't politically correct in many people's minds, because if you look on the BBC website today, there's nothing about the Starmer whiff of hypocrisy and lies. It's all about everything else, which is fine, but it does tell us that actually, you know, there are truths to be told and there are stories to be learned. And actually the people that phone this station all day say, thank God for honest reporting, because Keir Starmer, the problem with Keir Starmer from my point of view is manifold. But the one thing I have against him is when you... It's a bit like Harry and that dreadful woman, you know. I don't like press intrusion, so I'm going to America. Oh, I'm going to sign a deal and sign with Spotify. When you base your entire political career on, let's clean up politics. It's been jobs for the boys, it's cronyism, it's rubbish, it's lies. Within a week you're having suits and glasses. Within 3 weeks you're screwing pensioners. Then you're lying to farmers who you blatantly said I'm going to support. You've lied about council tax. And now it seems... I mean, here's the million-dollar question about the Met Police, Brendan. Love your response on this. 24 hours ago when Mike was saying, why haven't you done anything about this? And the police said, we need a complaint. Today they said we've had many complaints, but it's outside that 3-year statute of limitations. Why the hell, Brendan O'Deal, didn't the Met Police say that yesterday, 24 hours ago? Because they've scrabbled around and come up with lies, haven't they? That's the truth.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you that, you know, when Boris Johnson broke the rules, it made me really angry because I was not a fan of lockdown. I didn't like being locked down. No one I know liked being locked down. And yet there was Boris and his chums in Downing Street.
And by the way, I'm going to jump in for reason. Let's make the point, not sticking up for Boris. Labour wanted to lock down sooner and longer, mate. Let's make that point, right? Before we that's a fact.
Yeah, but you know, the point that you make, which is 100% correct, is that even though we were all ticked off with Boris, and he did break the rules, it is unquestionable that the media weaponized that incident in order to shove him out of power because they hated what he was saying about Brexit. They hated that he was not particularly woke in their view. They wanted a reason to get him out of power, and they used that birthday cake thing to get him out of power. So they weaponized it, they exploited it, they used it. But now when it comes to Keir Starmer, who they like a little bit more and whose politics they agree with, as you say, they're not even talking about it. So much of the media is completely stum on the fact that the current Prime Minister of this country, who fully supported lockdown, seems to have broken the lockdown rules pretty badly. So the media silence on this really confirms that large sections of the mainstream media are basically doing the batting of the Labour government rather than having the honest discussions we need to have about this rubbish.
I always find myself sometimes, not always, I find myself sometimes in situations where what I call the bedwetters, the loony left, all are in a room and they're all saying, and I always think, I wish Brendan was with me because you're so... What would you... I'm being serious. So what would you say to the people who are still at this moment saying, oh, it's ridiculous, Johnson was horrific, this is not the same at all? If you look them in the face and you come on, this doesn't make bleeding sense. The Met Police have either been coerced or have found some bizarre... This smacks of a cover-up. Are you going to tell me that every single person that has phoned, emailed and texted this station over the last 24 hours is a far-right thug? Because they're not. They're just decent British people who don't like being lied to.
Absolutely right. You know, Jeremy, the truth of it is we live in a failing state. You know, our government and other Western governments, they love to look around the world, especially in the third world, in poor countries, and say that's a failed state. Britain is now a failed state under Keir Starmer's government. The stories we've heard over the past few weeks since the start of this year, the rape gang scandal, which we know was never dealt with properly, the Nottingham killer whose medication was stopped too early, the Southport killer who was not stopped by Prevent and in fact his case was closed too early, and the 15 opportunities to stop him were missed by almost every wing of officialdom. This is a state that can't cope. It doesn't know what it's doing. It can't even keep its own citizens safe. And then at the same time, it's a state that is splashing money on teaching asylum seekers how to complain to the police about being called a name or whatever. giving them, yoga classes, which, lots of ordinary British citizens would quite like a yoga class if the government's willing to stump up money for that. It's a state that can't keep ordinary Brits safe from extreme violence and yet throws money at people who have just arrived here, often illegally, and should not be in this country. So the way in which this state is falling apart under the rule of Keir Starmer is really shocking.
And just going back to it, do you think? I mean, I guess the ideological elite, as I call them, have always got away with things like, they're all far-right thugs, or they're racist, or misogynistic, or homophobic. Do you feel, I mean, chief political writer for Spike, do you sense a change? Do you sense that genuine moderate people have had enough of being taken for mugs, to be honest?
I do, very strongly. And the other thing I get a sense of is that the establishment's old trick of calling us names when we say things it doesn't like, that's not working anymore.
No,
that's not in the way that it used to land. And you can hear that in the people who call your show or the people you meet on the street. You hear this all the time. You hear that people are sick and tired of being called Islamophobic or transphobic or xenophobic simply because they raise questions about mass immigration or radical Islam or anything else. It's not working. It's not cutting through in the way that it did over the past 10 years. So the government and its cheerleaders have got a real problem on their hands because the tactic they used to use to keep us in our place, that is falling apart very fast.
And it's really interesting because listening to you, myself, 5 years ago, I'd have gone, but to me, it's absolute sense. Somebody said something to me earlier today, Brendan, about Trump, and I thought it was really eye-opening. And I've said, and I always make this point when I talk about Trump, don't agree with everything he's done, and there's much of his language that sometimes I find abhorrent. But here's a man who stood up and said, this is what's wrong with my country. I'm going to make you better off, safer, healthier, and prouder than you've ever felt before. And 90 million people voted for him. And somebody said to me, I could not have imagined in 2017 being anywhere near supporting Donald Trump. It was not something that the majority of Americans would even contemplate. And this person said to me, I've changed completely. Donald Trump is exactly what the American people need. And I wonder whether, I know we're 4 years to go, but I wonder whether we're now almost like at the beginning of the Biden situation. I wonder whether over the next few months and years, not far-right thugs, just decent, normal, everyday people will go, something's got to give here. Two-party politics doesn't work anymore. Something's got to give. And if it is Reform or somebody else, we need fresh voices. We need politicians who do what they say they're going to do, even if they're bloody well unpopular. That's what we need. And I think that is going to grow and grow. And I think that the political main two parties need to be very careful if they try and fob that off as just, far right, it's an uprising, it'll go away. I don't think it's going anywhere. Final thoughts on that, Brendan?
Oh, the populist pushback in the Western world is only just beginning. And, they love to say about Trump that he's just a billionaire's government who is full of billionaires and they act on behalf of billionaires. That is complete codswallop. Trump's arrival in the White House, his return to the White House, was the result of a working class revolt. He created the largest cross-race, cross-age, working class bloc of voters in world history. And the fact that he won is the least mysterious thing that's ever happened in American politics. Ordinary people are sick and tired of having their bank balances raided by the state, of being looked down upon by Washington elites, of being made jokes about on Saturday Night Live, of being made fun of in the New York Times. They were sick and tired of all of it. And you know what? The exact same sentiment is rising in Britain. We are sick of the government lying to us and telling us it's not going to tax us more, and it does. We're sick of that cultural establishment treating us like gammon, which basically means pig meat, a bunch of idiots who don't know our asses from our elbows. People have had enough. And the atmosphere for a British Trump, if such a thing were to exist, it's really ripe now. People want change and they're going to start demanding it.
So good to have you on, mate. Sorry for the initial problems. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer of Spiked on Talk Drive. 6:22. Keep the calls coming. 0344 499 1000. But pin back your logos. Deputy Leader of Reform, the legend that is Richard Tice, next on Drive.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:25, JK on drive until Kev at 7 with his own asylum, which he probably needs to go into. This is from James. This government are treating most British citizens like village idiots. We need an uprising. Boris was removed. We now have a dictatorship that needs to be booted out of government. A very good evening to the Deputy Leader of Reform, MP for Boston and Skegness, Richard Tice. Hello, my friend.
Well, it's evening. I don't know whether many people think it's a good evening given what's going on in the UK around and about. But I suppose let's try and be upbeat as we head towards...
I don't know where to start. So let me explain to you my afternoon, because I know you've had a busy one and you start very early. So I wanted to start today saying how safeguarding in this country, when you consider, you know, that vile human being that murdered those 3 kids in Southport was missed by the government's terrorism organised thing Prevent 3 times. Great, well done. And then you think of Alex Rudabikana, right? The man who murdered. And I mean, it's frightening. Calico, I mean, in Nottingham, he's not allowed to have his records released because that could upset him. And I'm sat here doing this thinking, what sort of country do we live in where we don't safeguard British people, but we then allow people to come in, Richard, and be given all sorts of help? Today the police are helping illegal asylum seekers if they have hate crimes. And here, bang in the middle of it, we get the Met Police just give me the juiciest story of the day about Sir Keir Starmer. So in a very calm way, Richard Tice, because I want Reform to do something about this, I'd like you to explain to me the difference between Boris Johnson breaking COVID rules by having cake and Keir Starmer in Tier 4 having a voice coach to his office on Christmas Eve. And this is the man who said that if I was ever found to be lying, I would resign. But today the Met Police say, oh no, it's outside the timeline. This is dreadful, Richard.
It is dreadful, but actually the first thing we should say is that this person must be the worst voice coach in the world, because I think his voice might have actually got worse under her tuition. Who knows? Maybe they were practicing behind masks in order to maintain the rules and regulations. I'm not sure, but it does seem rather convenient, doesn't it? Yeah. That when Free Gear Keir gets caught out, and he has been caught out royally. It's amazing it's taken so long, but he has been properly caught out, that all of a sudden there's a technicality that suits basically the Prime Minister, suits everyone around him, and that the Met Police have found a way for this apparently to go away. So, yeah, it's I've not studied the details of the ruling, but it is designed to infuriate people. That's it.
I mean, the Met Police are basically saying, I had the statement before, it doesn't matter, but they're basically saying, you know, it's outside the 3-year statute of limitations. But I will put this to you and to Reform, that the one party we hear vocally from that take up causes that matter. 24 hours ago, when that story launched on this station, Mike Graham was asked a question by me, which is why haven't the police done anything? And Mike Seller did this morning, and the police said, we can't do anything unless there are reports of concern. There were obviously those reports over the last 24 hours, and thus they then said their piece. My question, which should be Reform's question, I think, is, why didn't the bloody police say that 24 hours ago? Don't bother complaining because it's past the threshold of 3 years. Because it's been made up. That's the truth.
Well, someone will have to dig into it for sure. I mean, it is just extraordinary. And it's what is infuriating everybody. So it seems like we've basically got another element of two-tier justice. And if you're Boris Johnson, then you're not allowed to have a piece of cake. But if you are Keir Starmer, then frankly, anything goes, whether it's moving between apartments, to suit you, whether it's freebies here, there and everywhere, or whether it's a voice coach on Christmas Eve that clearly was not a key worker and could have been done over Zoom. And they're just making up the rules to suit the wishes and intent of this dictatorial Prime Minister.
And one of the things that many people believe with reform, which is so refreshing, and we played Nigel's words at 5 o'clock, one of the other outrageous things that we were talking about today is, and there is real rage, the cancellation of local elections. Around 5 million people, Richard Tice, will be denied the chance to vote in local elections this year because our Ange has basically sort of tried to change things around a bit. Now, they can talk about boundaries and they can talk about democracy and you can talk about everything, but Nigel made a really salient point, which is if you're going to shake this all up and talk about mega councils and county councils, the truth of the matter is you're denying British people the democratic right to vote. You're running scared of reform. That's nailed on, isn't it? Everybody can see that.
It's completely nailed on. It's actually 5.5 million people. It's about 1 in 3, give or take, of all those elections that are due to take place this May. And the whole point is that I raised to the Secretary of State in the Chamber this afternoon is when you vote, you're actually passing judgment on the performance of the councillors who've been in office for the last 4 years. And many people will want to pass a poor judgment on how they've performed. Costs have gone through the roof, services have declined, and they want the opportunity to vote in reform councillors to try and shake things up and do the job properly. And that's been cancelled. And the only people who cancel elections are dictators. And I just touched on, essentially, we are seeing dictatorial behaviour from this Prime Minister and this government, who have got the most unbelievable power rush to their head. And what Angela Rayner could not confirm, although she said these elections wouldn't be any later than a year from now, when I challenged her on saying, well, you just admitted that you don't know what these current district councillors are going to be replaced with, and that might take more than a year, she couldn't really confirm whether or not it might take 2 years, it might take 3 years. I mean, these councillors are obviously worried about being kicked out. They're just quite happy to hang on in there.
What do you say to people, and I've had loads of emails, I always do, whenever candidates from Reform are on, people will say, look, the Brexit Party grew and became something huge, but that was for a specific reason. There are many people, Richard, who 5 years ago are not far right, they're just a moderate mainstream, who are so fed up with being eighth in the queue that they're becoming very, very vocal. I know that Reform, now leading the opinion polls, congratulations on that, this news this week, the first time ever. For me, a believer, I think that two-party system is gone forever, and you can jump up and down about proportional representation. I think the mood of this country is irreversible. Does Reform genuinely believe that it has the plan, the policies, the people, and not the leadership, but the nous to blow these two parties out the water in 4 years' time? Because if you do what I do for a living, mate, they call for it every day. They're sick of what's going on.
Without question, in 4 years' time, we will be ready. Of course, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of planning to do and organisation, but we have got the nous, we've got the business experience, we've got the track record. And to all those people who say, yeah, but you've never been in government, you don't know how to run the show, let me just remind them that it's the morons who've been in government and around Westminster for the last few years, who've come straight out of PPE at university, get involved in think tanks, who've been running the show. And I think the truth is most people accept they've messed it up. The country's knackered, it's going bust. So maybe you do actually want some people from outside with a track record of success in business coming in and, frankly, sorting it out and saving the country. Because I just make the simple observation, you can't keep spending more than you're earning. Eventually, you go bust. And even this week, we are hearing that the Office for Budget Responsibility, that the Chancellor is in complete kowtow and thrall to are now dramatically revising their growth forecast down, not only for 2025, but they're now revising them down for the year just finished, 2024. What that means is our debt figures are going to go through the roof. The city bond markets are going to get even more tense and volatile and scared. It's a pretty ugly picture that's coming down the track. It's a bit like being at the end of the tunnel and the lights facing you. It's not the lights at the end of the tunnel, I'm afraid. It's the oncoming train.
It's really interesting as well. I think that I like your point that people... We've always been in this system whereby Labour comes in, then the Tories come in, then Labour comes in, then the Tories come in. What I wanted to put to you was something that somebody said to me earlier in the week. You're at 26% in the latest opinion poll, Labour 25%, the Tories trailing in third. Let's imagine that Reform gets to 30%. Hear me out. Labour stays at 25, 26, the Tories at 20. I know that it's always been a case of no-go, but somebody said to me, if the right continues to be split, is that not a way for the Labour Party to get in? My answer to that caller was, I don't believe Reform should be looking to get into a partnership with the Tory party. I think Reform should be looking at winning those Liberal Democrat seats and taking as many voters from Labour as it is from the Tories as well. And that surely is the aim, because Reform has to believe, does it not, that it can form the next government, a majority government.
Do you remember that expression where people said that Reform was just splitting the vote and we should stand aside to let the Tories get in? Maybe if we're polling miles ahead of the Tories, which we are and we will be and in greater numbers, maybe actually the reverse is true. Maybe the Tories should just admit that they are toxic, they had the chance, they utterly blew it, they knackered the job for the country, and actually they should stand aside and let Reform come in and rescue the country. That's the reality of where we face. And I've got confidence that the great British voter will exercise common sense and will do the right thing at the appropriate moment.
Final question, Richard, great to have you on. Are you surprised, honestly, are you surprised at the force with which Reform seems to have taken off? Sure, incompetence from Starmer, the lies of 14 years and what that did. But it's now seen as a real political force and not just an abject sort of, let's just have a moan and vote Reform. People are saying this is a viable alternative. That must be great. But are you surprised by the speed with which that's happened?
Well, obviously, we're delighted. We're shocked by how quickly Labour have utterly messed up the job. Yeah. And that's the reason that we've accelerated so quickly. We were confident that we would get to these numbers and we will get way beyond this. But, Labour have done this to the country. And I think voters quite rightly are saying, we certainly can't look at the last lot. I mean, they broke Britain, and now Labour's in the process of bankrupting Britain. So why would you want to go back to the bunch that previously broke Britain, and where you've got a shadow foreign secretary, Priti Patel, who could not admit that they'd got anything wrong on mass immigration, letting in almost 1 million people in 1 year. She seemed rather proud of it and said that anybody who was challenging that should apologise to her. Remarkably shocking statement.
It's shocking, and that she didn't seem to understand where they'd gone wrong. Richard Tice, I know you're a busy man. I saw your post at 5 a.m. this morning, but really, really appreciate your time on the show as ever. Deputy Leader of Reform, Richard Tice, MP for Boston and Skegness as well on Talk Drive. 22 minutes to 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. You want to get your call in between now and 7? Do it right now, my friends.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7, hello to Stuart. He says, Jezza, whether it's outside 3 years or not, Keir Starmer is guilty of breaking the law. He's admitting he was in the wrong by stating he can't be touched because it's outside 3 years. Quite right. Clarify, please, why Boris was fine. There is no ruling that changes that someone can be set. I don't understand that, but basically everybody's saying the same thing. It's an absolute outrage. Jane Bates, go Peter Bleksley. Please shout it out louder. He's totally nailed everything. Peter Bleksley, legend. Steve's in Cambridge. A knighthood for common sense to Peter Bleksley. Mike from Dartford, good evening. I watch Prime Minister's Question Times. This government are corrupt. The opposition are useless. The whole system of governance in this country needs dismantling. Dark times. No pressure reform. Rachel says, Jezza, I can't tell you how angry I am after this latest pack of lives. Starmer needs to be gone just after join reform. Labour are a shower of... Oh, hello. Mick says Mussolini had a voice coach. Brilliant. Hey, Peter. Hey, Jez. Great show. Brittany in the USA. What, Spears? John's in Harrogate. Why don't you set up a template letter to number 10 Downing Street so that we can send letters of complaint? If they've got a few million letters, what would they do? No idea. Ignore it, probably. Chris is in Cornwall. JK, why can't somebody bring a private prosecution against two-tier liar? Jeff's in West Sussex. So Starmer gets off because of a little-known 3-year clause. So if he was investigated before this time, would he have been found guilty? Yes, he would have done. 18 minutes to 7 o'clock. That's the point. 0344 499 1000. Delighted to welcome our next guest, Dr. Bob Seeley, former Tory MP and military expert. Bob, good evening. How are you?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm very well. Good afternoon to your listeners.
I could pretend that they give a damn about Trump talking about Gaza. My audience are livid, man, about Keir Starmer. Livid, beyond livid. And we've talked, you and I have talked about, you know, pensioners and the heating allowance. We've talked about the tractor tax and how that's a land grab for the mad net zero rubbish that Ed Miliband spouts. But here's the truth. Say what you want about Boris Johnson. He was hounded by the mainstream press out for having a piece of cake, the pictures of the Queen. That pious man who's now in number 10 said that politics will be different, we'll do it correctly, and if I was ever found guilty, I would resign. He has been found guilty, and the bloody Met Police today, Bob, are saying, oh, it's outside the 3-year window. My question to you is simply this. Why didn't the Met Police say it 24 hours ago when it was first raised? This is a stitch-up, isn't it?
That was a great question. I don't have an answer, but I was listening to what you were saying, you and Richard were saying, and yeah, look, I think he's got off it again, and it's pretty obvious he's banged to rights. It is obvious that his voice coach broke the rules because she crossed from zone 4, tier 4 into tier 3. So at the time, that was not allowed. So even going to see him was a bad thing, for a wrong thing for her to do. Whether you like these rules or not was entirely another matter. And there are plenty of your listeners who think it was overkill and we shouldn't have acted the way we did.
Can I jump in with that, though? I was one of those, but we should also make the point. Keir Starmer and the bloody foreign... The opposition bench were arguing to lock down sooner and for longer. Let's make that point.
Yeah. This is about the hypocrisy of the left, not about COVID per se. By the way, can I just... I mean, Richard Tice, I count him as a friend. Can I just do a little bit of a fact check on what he just said, Jeremy? The Tories, the most recent poll had the Tories in the lead at 26, Labour and Reform 24. Whatever you think of the stuff that we got wrong last time, most council seats up and down the country that are being won from Labour by the Conservatives. So when Richard, who is a mate, says that they're miles ahead, it is not true. I think we have to work out what's going to happen between Reform and the Tories in the next few years. I think we've both got to try as hard as possible, make some big decisions 3 years out from now. I'm a patriot. The most important thing, and I suspect most of your listeners would agree, is that we have got to get rid of this god-awful, worst government in history, led by this pious, sanctimonious fraud. I get that. But I don't buy Richard's argument that they're miles ahead because there is no fact that supports that analysis.
I would suggest respectfully one thing to you, though, Bob, and we have good conversations and I appreciate your time. You've got 121 MPs. I've heard the argument that Kemi Badenoch is spending her time concentrating and understanding where the Tories went wrong. The one thing I will say about Rushd and his party, and I've been honest with you, I was a Tory voter all my life and I voted Reform because I didn't like members of your party telling me Reform was far right when I believed that their policies were the things I was brought up on. But here's my point. There is more noise from 5 Reform MPs about the things that people genuinely care about than 121 Tories put together. That's the salient point.
Right, I would defend it in this way, and I'm not saying that what you say is completely wrong. I do think Kemi's playing a long-term game. My advice to her, which I occasionally give to her team, is that there's a marathon, but there's also a sprint. There is a marathon until the next election, and if she wants to wait a few years for policy, that's fair enough. There is a race now to be an effective opposition, but also clearly against Reform, because we are vying for those votes on the right. So yes, I think I wouldn't say 5. I mean, the people I see, Richard Tice is very good in Parliament. I think Rupert Lowe is superb on social media. And Nigel Farage, he can pass wind in the lift and the Telegraph will stick it on their front page. So, good luck for them. Rob Jenrick is very good and is out there as just a shadow justice. Kemi's being out there as much as possible.
Was it a shame for your party that he didn't win, in your mind?
No, because I supported Kemi, but I think Robert is doing a great job. Out of all the Tory MPs, Rob Jenrick gets opposition more. But if you look at what Kemi is doing on social media, she is getting it. She is beginning to get it right now. And we are moving up in the polls. It varies, and we're 3 years out, so we're not going to lose sleep over either good polls or bad polls, but they are learning. You're right. There are Tory MPs who need to pull their weight far more. And, sadly, as you know, a lot of my best colleagues, a lot of really punchy colleagues, the sort of people that you would consider to be proper Conservatives, Jonathan Gullis, lots of people up in Red Wall land, Miriam Cates, all these good people, they lost their seats. So that was bad for our country. I think it's bad for those communities because they were the best thing that ever happened to those traditional Labour communities. But it was bad for our party as well. Because I would like there to be more Conservatives in the Conservative Party, but there are enough and more of them are making a noise. I accept what you say a little bit, but not entirely.
Just to look finally at the overall view of Starmer, I started the show today talking about how appalling the safeguarding seems to be, and that, we can miss the Southport killer, Prevent can allow him to walk free. We're not allowed to release the details of Calacone, the Nottinghamshire killer, because that would be disrespectful. We can have 6 people murdered in cold blood. We're giving out PlayStations to illegal migrants and teaching them how to report hate crimes. I will say this to any politician of any party, whether it's Kemi Badenoch or Richard Tice. Something's changed in this country, Bob. I think there was a period of time where people were just not interested in politics because they felt politicians were not good enough, and the expense scandal. Mr. and Mrs. Moderate, middle class, middle England, never broken the law. I keep saying it all day. Always worked, never broken the law, brought the kids up, never had a handout. Are not far-right thugs, have genuinely, and I would say, just hear me out, I would say this to Kemi Badenoch, Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, these people, right, are the bedrock of what's going to vote for the next government. These people are sick of being 8th in the queue. That, to me, is the absolute essence.
I completely agree. And the people who are talking about UKIP, i.e. Reform, as being fruitcakes, that was back in David Cameron's day. That was a long time ago. And I don't think Kemi Badenoch has ever said anything like that, nor has Rob Jenrick. When it comes to people's anger, look, I get it as a Conservative, small c Conservative and big C, whatever. I get that. I get that anger because I see it as well. I see these people and I think, what the hell are you doing in this country? And it's all very well. There's some big report into the Nottingham murders today saying the NHS screwed up. I mean, what was this guy doing in this country in the first place? The NHS wouldn't have screwed up if this person had been shown the way out much earlier because he was a danger to people. I get this. I would just say that, Labour voted against everything that we did to try to tighten the law. And to say that we did nothing, for me, the big offence that I think Reform is saying is that there's no difference. That is patently not true. You could say we should have done more, but everything that we did, we had to get through in opposition from Labour. We should have done more on ECHR because actually we came to realise 2 or 3 years out that it was simply too difficult to govern because of all the human rights legislation. I wish we'd thought about that earlier, but nobody was talking about that 10, 15 years ago. We learned these things as a society, but we did do stuff. We should have done more, but Labour are now undoing everything, including all the good stuff that we were doing to make sure that when you came here illegally, you were treated as a criminal. That is now going up in smoke, not because we're the same as Labour,
but because we tried to do something, we were forever tightening the laws. Pretty was forever, and other Home Secretaries were, every year we were bringing in new laws to try to deal with these ongoing problems. And Labour are now undoing everything that we are doing. And I think there is huge public anger, and you're going to see more of it. And now we've seen the Southport guy was actually a terror offence. I mean, for me, it raises big issues about all those people who were found guilty of irresponsible and sometimes pretty unpleasant and stupid posts on social media. But actually, their case now, I think, is questionable.
Do you know, Bob, I could talk to you forever. I'm out of time. You know that. I really appreciate you joining us. Ex-Tory MP, author of Total War about new forms of warfare in the 21st century. The legend is Dr. Bob City. Thank you to him. 9 minutes to 6. Kev is here at 7. This is Talk Drive.
This is, I think, about putting pressure on all sides, basically, to behave. I mean, obviously...
You think it's one of his negotiating
positions? They're not actually going... Gaza is not about to become the 51st state.
That's Canada.
Well, depends who wants it more. That's not going to happen. First and foremost, it's about putting a bit of pressure on Israel, about saying to the Israelis, look, you know, if you're not going to play nice, then we can just do what we want with this. We are big and powerful enough. But the whole thing about relocating people out of Gaza to the rest of the Arab world is also about saying to them, and you're going to have to play nice to it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
About 5 to 7. Jez, did this speech therapist even have a return ticket? Did she stay in London? How did she get home? Did the Labour Party pay her? Where's the proof she was on a job? Well, she might have been in a job, but not been the job you thought she was on, says Debbie. Caroline, so those driving lessons we're giving migrants, do they include how to dodge the potholes that were not getting fixed so they can do... But yes. Mark's in Coventry. I can see why Gen Z would prefer a dictatorship in this country. This prat we have makes Putin look like Mother Teresa. God help us. Linda, sorry, she says, but 3 words to describe my king: wet, weak and woke. Whoa. Jez, Tony from Kent here. I love your show, but please stop disparaging my team Spurs. No. Mark, we should owe an invoice to Keir Starmer for the council tax rises. Did his promise not to create a verbal contract between him and the people? Yeah, true. Dave's in South Gloucester. The answer to Starmer's escaping both Durham and the latest lockdown rule infringement is simple. Both areas are Labour-run and have Labour police and crime commissioners. Very good. I think the way Labour treated Farage in turn when he was speaking in Question Time today was absolutely diabolical. He handled it fantastically. I think Lindsay Hall should stand down because he is basically I'm not saying that. Barry's from Derbyshire. You make a good Reform MP, Jezza. What about it? Fiona's in Leeds. Yes, I agree. Finally, who is this? She's there. I don't know. Every day it just gets worse and worse. This government is absolutely abhorrent. I cannot even bear to look at our list or listen to Starmer or Rayner. How can we get rid of them sooner rather than later? We can't even have a general strike because they've got their unions in their pockets. Not sounding great. Kevin O'Sullivan's decided to walk into studio tonight. I'm going to ignore him. Let's go to Roger as a new caller in Cornwall. You've got 1 minute because the legend that is Kev O'Sullivan is here. Rog, go.
Hello there. This is a first for me. I was done in Jodie when I was born 1940, 1951 to a 12-year-old, had a sheath knife, I joined the Boy Scouts, went into school, said, teacher, can I sharpen my pencil, sir? Yes, coming out. So I'll go out the front, sharpen my pencil with this 6 or 7 inch blade sheath knife. And he said, oh, that looks sharp. Mind you don't cut yourself. I mean, what the hell's going on now? I wouldn't have dreamt of stabbing anybody with it. Why would I? Yeah.
The world. All I can say to you about this country, without wanting to sound like I've given up, is we in my mind have our priorities wrong. The definition of the truth has been redefined. We live under a government that will sort, I think, the law to suit themselves, which has been proven today. And Roger, many people of your age and older, like Kev O'Sullivan, look back at the past and think, what the hell's happened to everyday morality and rules? We appreciate your call. Roger in Cornwall. Kevin O'Sullivan,
hello,
how
mate.
are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Interesting days. I was just coming in here and talking about safeguarding, and then we get the bombshell news that Keir Starmer has managed to avoid being prosecuted for something he blatantly did, which is breaking lockdown rules.
He did break the rules, yeah. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
But apparently the police, it's outside this three-year
COVID restriction limit. Yes.
But my question to you is very simply this. Yesterday, when Mike and everybody was talking about it on this station and going, come on, why can't you do anything? And everybody went, well, the police need to have reports. So all these people rang the police, and then the police today said we can't do anything. Why didn't the bloody Metropolitan Police say that yesterday before anybody complained?
God knows. I mean,
he's got to them, hasn't he? Come on.
Yeah, the truth is, you know, he was never going to end up in court on this, was he? He's the Prime Minister. It's never going to happen.
Boris Johnson did.
But here's the deal. Well, didn't end up in court.
No, but he got a prosecution, Kev. And this one said, if I'm found guilty, I will do the same.
Well, he's wheedled out of it, and we knew he would. But here is the thing that you quite rightly say. We now know our Prime Minister's a liar. Yep. He's a hypocrite. He was down on Boris Johnson like a ton of bricks for breaking the COVID rules, the lockdown rules. He broke the lockdown rules. I mean...
And headed a party that wanted us locked down longer and sooner, right?
Yeah, and I think we should be investigating just whether or not Miss Leonie Mellinger is a personal friend of the Starmer family. That's an inquiry worth going into, don't you think?
You heard what the ex-husband did?
What?
It was Robin Asquith who was in those films,
Confessions of a Lockdown Breaker. It's one of my favourite movies.
Confessions of a Prime Minister. Was she there as a friend?
Yeah, exactly. That is something else. So this guy is a hypocrite.